My name is Sloan, and I am 29 years old. My mother told me my wedding could wait for the engagement party of my younger sister, Riley. My father called me just to say my wedding was just a party, and I should not be selfish. I simply whispered, "I get it," and hung up the phone. 6 hours later, my mother was screaming into my voicemail in absolute panic. My husband just smiled at me and said they must have finally Googled his name. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family member who constantly prioritized their golden child over your happiness. I work as a crisis public relations strategist at a top firm in Chicago. My entire professional life is built on maintaining absolute control when everything else falls apart. I am paid handsomely to fix disasters for high-profile clients, to anticipate the worst-case scenarios, and to see the angles that nobody else even considers. That intense professional detachment is exactly what kept me breathing when I stood in the grand lobby of the Grand Monarch Hotel. The space was a breathtaking masterpiece, featuring gilded ceilings, towering marble pillars, and polished floors, reflecting the light of massive crystal chandeliers. I was standing near the ornate central fountain, carefully reviewing the final floral designs for my wedding, which was scheduled for next month. The rich scent of imported white roses and fresh pink peonies completely filled the vast air around me. I had planned every single detail perfectly with my own hard-earned money. My fiancé Bennett and I wanted a simple but elegant celebration to mark the beginning of our lives together. Bennett is the absolute love of my life and the most grounded person I have ever met. He dresses exclusively in faded flannel shirts, worn denim jeans, and scuffed work boots. He tells everyone in my family that he works in property management. My parents have always looked down on him because he does not wear luxury brands or brag about his income at their dinner parties. They think he is just a blue-collar worker who barely scrapes by each month. They have no idea he is actually the billionaire founder and chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. His corporation owns this very hotel along with dozens of other ultra-luxury commercial properties and real estate developments across the country. We intentionally kept his massive wealth a strict secret because I knew exactly how my dangerously greedy family would react if they ever knew the real truth. I was in the middle of handing the finalized floral contract back to the hotel event coordinator when the heavy brass doors of the lobby swung open with aggressive force. My mother Carolyn marched in with my 26-year-old sister Riley, walking right beside her. Riley has always been the undisputed golden child of our family. She is a superficial social media influencer who cares only about appearances, designer labels, and perceived status. Riley very recently got engaged to a man named Devin Prescott. Devin is a successful and kind African-American man who hails from a prestigious, wealthy family based in Atlanta. He is completely unaware of how toxic, manipulative, and racist my sister and parents truly are beneath their polished suburban facade. My parents see Devin and his elite family as their golden ticket into high society. They are desperate to impress the Prescott family at any cost and will destroy anyone who gets in their way. My mother walked straight up to the hotel event coordinator and slapped a printed credit card statement down on the polished mahogany desk with a loud smack. She aggressively announced that she was canceling my wedding reservation immediately. I stared at her in complete disbelief as the reality of her ambush settled over me. I calmly explained to the coordinator that the wedding was mine and the date was booked entirely under my name. My mother smiled a cold and triumphant smile that made my stomach turn. She pointed a manicured finger at the credit card statement and reminded the coordinator that the initial holding deposit was charged to her card. I had transferred the full amount back to my mother the very same day to cover the charge, but she was maliciously using the technicality of the cardholder name to legally hijack the reservation from me. The coordinator looked incredibly uncomfortable, shifting her gaze between us, but my mother was relentless and loud. She demanded that the prestigious venue and the prime date be immediately transferred to Riley for her upcoming engagement party. Riley stepped directly into my personal space, a smug expression on her face. She shoved her hand in my face to deliberately show off her massive diamond engagement ring. She let out a loud, fake laugh and told me my wedding to a lowly property manager could happen in some cheap community hall. She boldly claimed that a nobody like Bennett did not deserve a luxury venue like the Grand Monarch. She insisted that her engagement to the wealthy Prescott heir required absolute perfection and luxury. She boldly called me utterly pathetic for even thinking I could possibly have a nice wedding when my fiancé could barely afford to buy a decent suit. I stood there observing their sheer audacity and blatant cruelty. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice or cause a scene. I simply engaged my crisis management instincts and locked away my emotions. I watched in total silence as my mother signed the cancellation paperwork and authorized the new booking for Riley using the funds I had already paid her. My mother looked at me with pure disdain in her eyes. She told me I should be grateful to step aside for my sister because Riley actually had a future worth celebrating. She stated that my marriage to Bennett would do nothing to elevate the family status, so my personal desires were completely irrelevant. The absolute cruelty of her words washed over me, but I kept my posture rigid and my expression entirely unreadable. I was already silently taking meticulous mental notes of every single permanent boundary they were so effortlessly crossing today. Right at that very exact moment, my cell phone aggressively vibrated deep inside my winter coat pocket. It was my father Howard calling. I answered the call hoping for a brief, foolish second that he might be calling to act as the voice of reason. Instead, his voice blasted through the speaker with harsh, unyielding irritation. He did not ask how I was doing or if I was upset. He immediately ordered me to stop causing trouble for my mother and sister at the hotel. "Your wedding is just a party," he said loudly, his voice echoing slightly from the phone. "Do not be selfish and ruin this monumental opportunity for Riley. Her marriage to Devin is going to change everything for this family. You need to know your place and stop getting in her way." I listened to his heavy breathing on the other end of the line. I thought about the decades of being pushed aside and treated as an afterthought. The years of working myself to absolute exhaustion to build a solid career, while Riley was handed everything on a silver platter and praised for simply existing. I realized in that profound moment that they would never see me as a daughter worthy of love or respect. I was nothing more than a convenient stepping stone or a minor obstacle to their relentless social climbing. I did not scream at him. I did not beg for his love or try to explain how much they were hurting me. I simply closed my eyes and whispered, "I get it," directly into the receiver. Then I tapped the red button and ended the call, severing my emotional connection to them forever. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and looked at my mother and sister one last time. They were already busy pointing at the crystal chandeliers and planning exactly where to put the lavish ice sculptures for the engagement party. They completely and utterly ignored my very existence, treating me as if I had already permanently vanished from the room. Suddenly, the heavy revolving doors moved, and Bennett walked into the magnificent lobby. He was wearing his usual faded green flannel shirt, dark worn denim jeans, and his comfortable boots. He walked over to me with his hands casually resting in his pockets, completely unfazed by the opulence surrounding him. Bennett took one look at my face, and then glanced over at Carolyn and Riley, who were still aggressively gloating by the reception desk. With his sharp intellect, he understood immediately what had transpired. He did not look angry or surprised by their toxic behavior. He just offered me a soft, knowing smile that spoke volumes without making a single sound. He reached out and gently squeezed my shoulder silently, reminding me of the immense hidden power we held over this entire establishment. As my mother and sister strutted away toward the hotel restaurant to celebrate their stolen venue, I pulled my phone back out. I dialed the direct number for my top public relations assistant. She answered immediately, ready for instructions. "Start laying the absolute perfect trap for them," I told her very calmly. "We have a new project, and it requires perfect execution." I sit at my glass desk on the 40th floor of my downtown Chicago public relations firm. The skyline outside my window is a sea of steel and glass, mirroring the cold, calculated mindset I need to survive the upcoming week. My team is already moving quietly in the background, laying the groundwork for the trap I ordered earlier. But my family is never satisfied with just one victory. They always push for total destruction. The private line on my desk rings, cutting through the quiet hum of the corporate floor. The caller identification flashes with my mother's cell phone number. I press the speaker button, resting my hands flat against the cool surface of my desk. My mother does not offer a greeting. She immediately launches into a rapid-fire list of demands. She tells me that since I am a professional event strategist, I will be taking over the full coordination of Riley's new engagement party at the Grand Monarch. She expects me to leverage my elite industry connections to secure the best caterers, security teams, and floral designers entirely for free. She casually mentions that I owe this to the family to make up for my selfish behavior in the lobby the other day. She demands that I call in every professional favor I have acquired over my career to ensure her golden child gets a spectacular event without my parents having to pay the premium industry rates. I tell her absolutely not. I firmly state that my professional vendors are not charity workers and I will not exploit my corporate relationships to fund a party she stole from me. The line goes dead silent for 3 seconds before her voice drops into a low, venomous register. She tells me she still has the contact information for the chief executive officer of my biggest client account. She reminds me of the 3 days I spent in the hospital last month, severely dehydrated and suffering from extreme physical exhaustion after closing a massive merger campaign. My parents had used that hospitalization to mock my inability to handle stress. Now my mother is weaponizing it. She threatens to call my top clients and carefully fabricate a compelling narrative about my declining mental health. She promises to tell them I am suffering from a severe psychological breakdown and that I am currently unfit to handle their multi-million-dollar public relations accounts. She knows exactly how fragile corporate trust is. One rumor about a crisis manager having a mental break would instantly incinerate the career I spent 7 years building. The sheer audacity of her blackmail hangs in the quiet air of my office. She is entirely willing to burn my livelihood to the ground simply to get free appetizers and discounted champagne for her golden child. I do not panic. I do not raise my voice to argue against her insane threat. I process her blackmail as a strategic vulnerability on her part. She wants me to act as the official vendor liaison for the event. I realize instantly that if I am the one drafting the vendor agreements, I can legally structure the liability exactly how I want. I force my voice to sound defeated and softly tell her I will handle the coordination. She lets out a triumphant scoff, praises me for finally acting like a supportive sister, and hangs up. I need to sever my physical ties to them before the financial trap closes completely. During my lunch hour, I drive out to their sprawling house in the pristine northern suburbs to retrieve my birth certificate, passport, and old tax files locked in my father's home office safe. I know my parents are currently out at a country club luncheon, and Riley is downtown shopping for engagement shoes. The house is completely silent when I unlock the front door and step inside. The air smells like expensive vanilla diffusers and lemon polish, a masking scent for the rot underneath. I walk straight to my father's study, input the combination to the wall safe, and retrieve my manila folder of vital documents. I check the contents to ensure nothing is missing before I carefully tuck the folder into my leather tote bag. My mission is accomplished, and my only desire is to leave this suffocating house as quickly as possible. I step out of the study and begin walking back down the long carpeted hallway toward the front door. As I pass Riley's oversized bedroom, I notice her door is pushed wide open. The afternoon sunlight streams through her large bay windows, illuminating a chaotic mess of discarded clothes and luxury shopping bags scattered indiscriminately across the plush white carpet. I stop dead in my tracks. My breath catches sharply in my throat as my eyes lock onto the garment hanging from the brass hook on her closet door. It is my wedding dress. I had spent 8 months of my own savings to commission that custom haute couture gown from a brilliant independent designer in New York. It was a masterpiece of structural silk and delicate hand-beaded lace, meant to symbolize the start of my new life with Bennett. I had safely stored it inside a protective garment bag in the guest bedroom closet at my parents' house because my own city apartment lacked the proper temperature-controlled storage space to keep the long train pristine. Now the protective garment bag lies crumpled on Riley's floor like discarded trash. I step slowly into her bedroom, my eyes scanning the horrific damage inflicted upon the most expensive and meaningful item of clothing I have ever owned. Riley has completely butchered it. The intricate lace neckline has been recklessly hacked apart with fabric scissors, leaving jagged, uneven edges of expensive silk fraying into nothing. The elegant long sleeves I had specifically designed to trail down my arms have been chopped off entirely, transforming the dress into a cheap-looking strapless silhouette. The beautifully structured bodice has been clumsily folded over and pierced with dozens of thick silver safety pins, crudely altering the dimensions to fit Riley's exact measurements for her upcoming engagement party. The delicate hem has been stepped on and stained, leaving dark marks across the pure white fabric. She did not just steal my venue. She walked into the guest room, ripped my wedding dress from its protective casing, and mutilated it to serve as her evening gown. The sheer violation of this theft forces me to reach out and grip the edge of her cherry wood dresser to physically steady myself. My own sister stole the dress I bought with my hard-earned money and destroyed it without a single second of hesitation or remorse. She actually plans to wear my ruined wedding gown while standing in the venue she stole from me to celebrate an engagement she values more than my entire existence. A normal person would fall to the floor in a puddle of devastated tears. A normal sister would scream into the empty house, feeling the crushing weight of such a malicious personal attack. I do not. The icy rage that courses through my chest burns away any lingering trace of familial loyalty I might have unconsciously harbored. Every silver pin shoved through the delicate silk is a shining testament to their absolute lack of respect for my humanity. Every jagged scissor cut is a physical manifestation of their willingness to destroy me for their own amusement. I pull my phone from my pocket and open the camera application. I methodically take a dozen high-resolution photographs of the butchered gown from every possible angle. I capture the jagged scissor cuts, the crude safety pins, and the discarded garment bag bearing my name discarded on the floor. I ensure the timestamp and location data are perfectly embedded into the metadata of every single image, capturing irrefutable proof of her vandalism. This is no longer just a bitter family dispute over a hotel booking. This is documented destruction of high-value personal property. I do not touch the dress. I do not try to rescue the remaining silk or confront her via a frantic text message. I leave it hanging exactly where it is, a grotesque monument to her infinite selfishness and staggering vanity. I turn around and walk out of her bedroom without making a single sound. I walk down the pristine hallway, out the heavy oak front door, and lock it firmly behind me, sealing them inside their own impending doom. I walk to my car in total silence, the quiet suburban neighborhood completely oblivious to the absolute war that has just been finalized in my mind. I start the engine and grip the leather steering wheel, letting the cold material ground my racing thoughts. My mother wants me to use my professional crisis management skills to organize their grand society event. She openly threatened my entire livelihood to force my total compliance. My sister maliciously destroyed the sacred symbol of my marriage simply to elevate her own fleeting vanity. They want my absolute expertise. They are going to get exactly what they asked for in the most devastating way possible. I pull away from the curb, shifting my car into gear and driving back toward the towering skyline of the city. The anger sitting inside me is no longer a chaotic, swirling storm of grief and disappointment. It is a highly refined, heavily concentrated fuel, driving my retaliation strategy relentlessly forward. I will draft their vendor contracts exactly as my mother demanded over the phone. I will ensure the engagement party is the most lavish, expensive, and unforgettably opulent event the Grand Monarch has ever hosted in its history, and I will make absolutely certain, through watertight legal clauses and liability transfers, that when the massive bill finally comes due, there will be no escape for any of them. The drive back to the city center crystallizes my anger into a sharp, tactical focus. I park my car and take the elevator up to my apartment overlooking the sprawling Chicago skyline. The space is a sanctuary of minimalist design and quiet order, a stark contrast to the suffocating, chaotic toxicity I just left behind at my parents' suburban house. I drop my leather tote bag containing my vital documents onto the smooth granite kitchen island and walk straight to my meticulously organized home office. My mother demanded my professional crisis management skills to coordinate her golden child's engagement party. She ruthlessly threatened to destroy my hard-earned corporate reputation if I refused to secure premium vendors for free. She believed she had cornered me into submission. She failed to realize that forcing a crisis strategist to draft your legal documents is a catastrophic miscalculation. I power on my high-performance workstation and pull up the master templates for high-level event coordination. My fingers fly across the glowing keyboard as I begin systematically structuring the rigid agreements for the catering team, the floral designers, and the private security firm. My mother expects me to use my industry leverage to secure massive discounts and attach my own professional credit to the event. I do the exact opposite. I select the most exclusive, uncompromising luxury vendors in the city. The catering company alone demands a premium for securing rare imported ingredients on such short notice. The floral design team requires an exorbitant upfront guarantee for the exotic blooms my sister insists upon. The private security detail, which my parents requested to keep unwanted guests away, operates on a strict premium retainer. I meticulously modify the standard liability clauses buried deep within the fine print of every single contract. Using the legal loopholes I have mastered through years of corporate damage control, I isolate my own identity completely. I meticulously remove my name, my professional agency, and my financial information from every single guarantee clause. I transfer the entirety of the legal and financial burden directly onto Carolyn and Howard. I intentionally structure the complex billing terminology so that they are explicitly listed as the sole primary stakeholders assuming absolute responsibility for every inflated charge, every cancellation penalty, and every premium service fee incurred. The sheer psychological satisfaction of carefully drafting these devastating documents from the absolute quiet of my empty apartment is immense and deeply gratifying. Every single rapid keystroke feels exactly like a permanent structural reinforcement of the massive protective boundary I am finally building against them. I make absolutely certain that the astronomical final invoices will completely bypass my desk entirely and route directly to my parents' personal financial accounts. I legally bind them to strict unforgiving payment schedules that offer zero leniency and absolutely no corporate discounts whatsoever. By the exact time I finish reviewing the final drafts, the financial trap is completely and inescapably airtight. I attach the heavily modified legal documents to an encrypted email and send them directly to my mother with a brief professional note instructing her to sign at the bottom to secure her desired luxury vendors. I know her vanity and her desperate need to impress Devin and his prestigious Atlanta family will blind her entirely to the microscopic print. She will blindly sign the papers without a second thought, eager to brag about the elite services she foolishly believes I secured for free. While I am orchestrating their financial ruin from the quiet isolation of my apartment, Bennett is navigating the bustling business district a few miles away. He steps into an ultra-exclusive high-end coffee shop favored by corporate executives and wealthy investors. The atmosphere inside is hushed and sophisticated, filled with the low hum of high-stakes financial conversations. Bennett blends into the background perfectly in his worn denim jeans and faded green flannel shirt. He stands near the artisan espresso counter, projecting the unassuming aura of an ordinary blue-collar worker, taking a much-needed mid-afternoon break. He orders a simple black coffee and leans against the polished marble counter, calmly observing the bustling room with the quiet, analytical gaze of a billionaire who secretly owns a significant portion of the surrounding commercial real estate empire. A few moments later, Devin walks into the very same coffee shop. Riley's fiancé looks impeccably sharp in a tailored navy suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Devin exudes the refined, educated elegance of his prominent African-American family, a stark contrast to the superficial posturing of my own parents. He orders a complicated espresso drink and steps to the side, waiting patiently near Bennett. Despite the obvious disparity in their outward appearances, Devon does not dismiss the rugged man standing beside him. Unlike my mother and sister, who treat anyone outside their perceived social tax bracket with blatant disdain, Devon possesses genuine class and decency. He offers Bennett a polite nod and strikes up a casual, friendly conversation about the bitter Chicago wind. Bennett responds with his usual grounded charm, allowing the casual conversation to effortlessly flow naturally. Devon sighs heavily, rubbing the back of his tired neck, and admits that the bitter weather is the least of his current worries. The crushing weight of his upcoming engagement party and a massive ongoing family business deal is clearly taking a heavy toll on his shoulders. With a remarkably open and vulnerable demeanor, Devon reveals the specific source of his immense stress. He explains that his family in Atlanta is currently spearheading a highly ambitious philanthropic real estate project designed to uplift an underprivileged community. He speaks with deep passion about the transformative potential of the development, emphasizing how much the initiative means to his parents and their legacy. However, Devon confesses that the entire community project is currently hanging by a dangerously fragile thread. He reveals that they are anxiously waiting on a critical make-or-break approval from the primary financial investor. He specifically names Apex Holdings, the massive national conglomerate widely known for its exceptionally aggressive market dominance. Devon readily admits his deep anxiety regarding the elusive chief executive officer of the corporation, a notoriously private billionaire who holds the absolute ultimate power to either immediately greenlight the community project or completely crush it with a single signature. He expresses his fear that a ruthless corporate titan might not care about the philanthropic heart of the development, leaving his entire family legacy in severe jeopardy. Bennett listens to this entire confession with absolute undivided attention. He maintains his relaxed posture, sipping his black coffee without allowing a single flicker of recognition to cross his face. He is standing inches away from a man who is terrified of him, a man who is about to marry into the very family that just tried to destroy his fiancée. The profound irony of the situation rests heavily in the air between them. Devon is pouring his heart out to the exact billionaire chief executive officer he so desperately needs to impress, completely unaware that the man in the faded flannel shirt holds the absolute power of life and death over his family project. Bennett does not reveal his true identity. He does not offer a pristine business card or suddenly shift into a highly commanding and intimidating corporate persona. Instead, he offers Devon a piece of vague but deeply prophetic and meaningful encouragement. He tells Devon that true visionary leaders often value genuine integrity far over superficial profit margins. He softly suggests that the elusive chief executive officer might just be waiting patiently to see the true character of the specific people involved before making a final sweeping decision. He reassures Devon that people who operate with purely honest intentions and actively protect their communities usually find that the universe rewards their unwavering integrity in the most spectacularly unexpected ways. He simply advises Devon to always stay true to his own deepest core values and let the chips fall exactly where they are meant to land. Devon seems genuinely comforted by the profound wisdom delivered by the seemingly ordinary man. He visibly relaxes, letting out a long, deep breath and thanking Bennett for the unexpected yet much-needed reassurance. He grabs his complicated espresso drink and shakes Bennett's hand firmly, expressing his immense gratitude for the grounded perspective before heading out the heavy glass door to prepare for the lavish engagement party. Bennett watches him leave the busy cafe, a sharp, calculating intelligence flashing brightly in his keen eyes. The strategic pieces of the intricate chessboard are rapidly moving into perfect, unyielding position. The arrogant blindness and unchecked cruelty of my toxic family is about to violently collide with the immense hidden power we silently command from the shadows. The financial trap is firmly set. The binding contracts are meticulously drafted, and the silent countdown to their absolute social and financial destruction is rapidly accelerating toward its inevitable dramatic conclusion. The silent countdown to my family's ultimate financial and social ruin brings us to the evening of the highly anticipated rehearsal dinner. The chosen venue is a notoriously exclusive Michelin star restaurant located deep within the city's most affluent district. It is an establishment known for its intimidatingly upscale atmosphere, months-long waiting lists, and a clientele that operates exclusively within the highest echelons of corporate and social power. The air inside the dining room is thick with the scent of truffles and expensive aged wine, illuminated by the soft golden glow of geometric modern chandeliers. For my parents, Howard and Carolyn, this dinner represents the absolute pinnacle of their lifelong desperate ambition to climb the social ladder. Bennett and I arrive exactly on time, stepping into the hushed elegance of the grand foyer. Bennett is dressed in his signature unapologetic style. He wears a clean, dark green flannel shirt, perfectly fitted dark denim jeans, and his usual scuffed leather boots. He looks ruggedly handsome and entirely comfortable in his own skin, but he stands in stark contrast to the sea of tailored tuxedos and designer silk gowns filling the private dining room. I wear a simple but impeccably tailored dark sheath dress, projecting the sharp professional detachment I utilize in corporate boardrooms. Before we can even approach the main gathering space, Carolyn intercepts us with the frantic, aggressive energy of a woman terrified of losing control over her carefully curated image. She does not offer a greeting or a maternal embrace. She immediately grabs my arm with a painful pinching grip and steers us sharply away from the center of the room. She meticulously planned the seating arrangements weeks in advance to ensure the physical layout of the room perfectly reflected her toxic family hierarchy. She guides us past the beautifully decorated central tables and shoves us toward the absolute worst location in the entire establishment. Our designated spot is a tiny cramped two-seater table shoved aggressively against the swinging wooden doors of the busy restaurant kitchen. It is completely isolated from the main celebration, surrounded by the constant, chaotic traffic of harried waiters and busboys. Every single time the heavy kitchen doors swing open, a blast of cold, drafty air and the loud, clattering noise of industrial dishwashing washes over our small table. It is a highly calculated physical manifestation of exactly where my mother believes we rank in her social hierarchy. She has literally banished her eldest daughter to the shadows to ensure Riley and her wealthy new in-laws command the entire spotlight. I slide into my chair without a single word of protest, carefully smoothing my napkin over my lap. I do not give Carolyn the satisfaction of seeing any hurt or humiliation on my face. I simply engage my crisis strategist mindset, documenting the blatant disrespect as yet another data point in my overarching plan. Carolyn, however, is not satisfied with merely isolating us. She requires a public spectacle to fully establish her dominance. She steps back from our cramped table holding a crystal glass of expensive champagne and intentionally projects her voice so that it carries across the quiet, elegant dining room. She looks Bennett up and down with exaggerated theatrical disgust, her face twisting into a mask of cruel amusement. She loudly asks Bennett if he came straight from unclogging a filthy toilet at one of his low-income properties. She laughs a high-pitched, brittle sound that grates against the sophisticated atmosphere of the restaurant. She loudly proclaims to the guests seated nearby that she offered to buy Bennett a proper suit, but he simply lacks the refined taste to appreciate high society dress codes. She weaponizes his modest appearance, using his perceived status as a blue-collar property manager to viciously mock him in front of the extended family and the elite Prescott guests. She wraps her venom in the guise of playful family banter, but the malicious intent is unmistakably clear. She wants everyone in the room to look down on the man I love, to view us both as the pathetic failures of the family. I watch her perform this grotesque social theater with absolute icy stillness. I memorize the exact tone of her voice, the cruel curve of her smile, and the eager nodding of my father Howard, who watches from the main table with obvious approval. I keep my posture rigid and my breathing slow, anchoring myself in the absolute certainty of the legal and financial traps I have already meticulously set in motion. My gaze shifts away from my mother and travels toward the center of the room, where the true guests of honor are seated. The VIP table is adorned with cascading white orchids and imported crystal. Seated at the head of the table are Devon's parents, Judge Kenneth Prescott, and his elegant wife. They are the absolute epitome of established generational African American excellence, hailing from a prestigious lineage in Atlanta. Judge Prescott is a man of profound intellect and quiet, unshakable dignity. He wears a perfectly tailored dark suit, his posture immaculate, and his expression keenly observant. I watch Judge Prescott very closely. His dark, intelligent eyes track my mother's loud nouveau riche performance near the kitchen doors. He does not look impressed by the expensive wine or the lavish floral arrangements my parents have desperately funded. Instead, he looks visibly uncomfortable and deeply disturbed by the blatant lack of class Carolyn is displaying. A man who has spent his entire life commanding respect in federal courtrooms can easily recognize toxic insecurity when he sees it. I watch him exchange a brief, meaningful glance with his wife. Her subtle frown mirrors his silent disapproval. They possess the kind of quiet generational wealth and dignity that does not require humiliating others to prove its own worth. They are watching Carolyn publicly degrade her own eldest daughter, and they are clearly repulsed by the grotesque display of her cruel character. Seated beside his parents, Devin looks equally uneasy. He is dressed sharply in a tailored evening jacket, but the exhaustion from his ongoing family business stress is still faintly visible around his eyes. As Devin scans the room, his gaze lands on our tiny, drafty table by the kitchen. He locks eyes with Bennett. I watch a flicker of genuine surprise and sudden recognition cross Devin's face. He clearly recognizes the rugged, unassuming man who offered him such profound, encouraging advice at the coffee shop earlier today. Devin offers Bennett a polite, slightly confused nod of respect. He clearly cannot understand why the insightful, grounded man he met in the business district is currently being treated like absolute garbage by his future mother-in-law. Before Devin can investigate further, Riley aggressively pulls his attention back to her. Riley is wearing the stolen butchered remains of my custom haute couture wedding dress, which she has crudely altered to serve as her evening gown. She loudly demands Devin's attention, pointing at a lavish dessert display and laughing with artificial brightness. She is completely oblivious to the deep discomfort radiating from her future husband and his distinguished parents. Through this entire agonizing ordeal, Bennett remains perfectly and beautifully unfazed. He sits across from me in the cramped, noisy corridor, fully embracing the chaotic draft from the kitchen doors. He unfolds his linen napkin and begins to enjoy his meal with the quiet, relaxed satisfaction of a man completely at peace with himself. He does not flinch when my mother hurls her insults. He does not shrink under the judgmental stares of my extended family members, who whisper behind their hands. Bennett simply cuts his steak, sips his sparkling water, and watches the room with cool, predatory amusement. He reaches across the small table and gently rests his large, warm hand over mine. His touch is a steady, unbreakable anchor in the middle of this toxic storm. He leans forward and quietly tells me that the food is actually excellent and that the view from our table is highly educational. He softly points out that there is nothing more fascinating than watching incredibly arrogant people gleefully dig their own social graves with such enthusiastic precision. His quiet strength grounds me completely. I look into his sharp, intelligent eyes and see the immense hidden power he carries so effortlessly beneath his flannel shirt. He is a billionaire corporate titan accustomed to ruthlessly dismantling hostile takeovers in glass boardrooms, yet he sits by a kitchen door taking insults from a desperate suburban housewife without a single ounce of fragile ego. He knows with absolute certainty that every cruel joke Carolyn makes and every dismissive glance Howard offers is just another nail they are hammering into their own impending coffin. I take a sip of my water, leaning into the comforting warmth of Bennett's hand. We sit together in the shadows of the Michelin star restaurant, entirely isolated from the main celebration, but completely united in our silent knowledge. We watch Judge Prescott slowly distance his posture from my father. We watch Devin look with growing unease at Riley's frantic, superficial behavior. We watch Carolyn parade around the room, completely blind to the profound disgust she is generating among the very elite family she is so desperate to impress. The rehearsal dinner continues around us, a spectacular display of toxic vanity and impending ruin. We eat our dinner in quiet satisfaction, knowing that the stage is now perfectly set for the devastating financial consequences that will arrive with the morning sun. The lavish rehearsal dinner pushes well past its third grueling hour, transitioning slowly into a spectacular parade of excessive indulgence that borders heavily on the grotesque. From my isolated vantage point by the swinging wooden kitchen doors, I watch closely as my parents orchestrate an endless, continuous stream of absolute culinary extravagance. Rare vintage champagne flows freely from frosted green bottles into tall crystal flutes, while heavy silver platters of white truffle risotto and gold leaf decorated desserts are presented eagerly to the prominent elite table at the center of the room. My mother is practically vibrating with frantic manic energy, utterly convinced she is successfully cementing our family status securely among the wealthy elite. She laughs far too loudly at her own shallow jokes, leaning aggressively close to Judge Prescott, who deliberately maintains a rigid, polite physical distance from her overbearing presence. My father simply nods along with a glazed expression, ordering yet another incredibly expensive bottle of imported French wine, hoping to desperately impress his future son-in-law. They are spending money with reckless, careless abandon, entirely intoxicated by the powerful illusion of their own carefully manufactured grandeur. Bennett and I sit quietly at our tiny, drafty two-seater table, finishing our modest, unassuming portions in complete peace. We share a silent, profound mutual understanding as we observe the massive financial bubble rapidly expanding right before our very eyes. The sheer gluttony of the evening is truly staggering, but I feel absolutely zero anxiety about the rapidly mounting costs accumulating across the room. Every single tiny plate of imported caviar and every single poured glass of vintage reserve wine is just another incredibly heavy stone they are willfully tying directly to their own ankles. As the final decorative dessert plates are efficiently cleared away by the highly meticulous waitstaff, a very sudden and subtle shift occurs in the dining room atmosphere. The senior head waiter, clad in an immaculate dark tailored suit, emerges directly from the bustling kitchen, holding a thick black leather folder containing the massive final bill. He moves with highly practiced professional discretion toward the center table, fully intending to present the heavy invoice to the designated hosts of the evening. My mother aggressively intercepts him before he can even reach my father. She stands up abruptly from her plush velvet seat, ensuring the sudden rapid movement catches the undivided attention of every single wealthy patron dining in the exclusive restaurant. She raises her voice to a highly theatrical, dramatic volume, deliberately piercing the refined, elegant quiet of the dining room. She points a perfectly manicured, rigid finger directly at our cramped, tiny table by the cold kitchen doors, loudly instructing the head waiter to immediately deliver the expensive bill to her eldest daughter. She projects her voice even further, loudly announcing to the entire stunned dining room that it is finally time for her utterly ungrateful child to step up and pay her fair share of dues. She paints a highly malicious fictional narrative claiming, "I have selfishly taken advantage of their boundless parental generosity for decades," and insists that covering this astronomical $18,000 dinner is the absolute very least I can do to show proper, appropriate respect for my successful younger sister. The entire prestigious Michelin star restaurant plunges instantly into a sudden, suffocating, absolute silence. The soft, pleasant clinking of heavy silverware against fine bone china completely and utterly stops. Wealthy, distinguished patrons at adjacent tables physically turn in their plush seats to openly stare at the bizarre suburban melodrama unfolding so brazenly in their exclusive private sanctuary. The Prescott family looks absolutely deeply mortified by the grotesque public display of aggressive financial weaponization. Devon stares blankly at Riley, clearly expecting her to immediately intervene and stop her mother, but my sister just smirks coldly, sipping her sparkling champagne while watching me with intense, malicious anticipation. The senior head waiter looks incredibly deeply uncomfortable, finding himself caught squarely in the middle of a highly toxic, vindictive family dispute. He hesitates for a fraction of a tense second before slowly walking toward our completely isolated table, carrying the heavy leather folder. He places the invoice very gently on the small wooden table between Bennett and me, casting a deeply apologetic, sympathetic glance in our immediate direction. The staggering $18,000 total glares up harshly from the crisp, white printed receipt. My mother watches intensely from across the quiet room, a highly victorious, cruel sneer plastered firmly across her face, eagerly waiting for me to suddenly panic cry or desperately beg for financial mercy in front of high society. I do not flinch even slightly. I do not show a single microscopic trace of the profound humiliation she is so desperately trying to inflict upon me tonight. Instead, I perfectly maintain my highly calibrated professional corporate detachment. I calmly open my sleek, dark designer clutch resting quietly on my lap. I bypass my personal credit cards entirely and carefully extract a single neatly folded legal document. It is the highly binding vendor agreement I had meticulously drafted in the absolute quiet of my apartment days ago, anticipating this exact specific scenario. I slowly unfold the crisp white paper and place it directly on top of the extravagant restaurant bill, smoothing out the sharp creases with deliberate, unwavering precision. The comprehensive document clearly features my mother's signature firmly at the bottom, securing her complete agreement to the heavily modified financial terms. I point directly to the specific liability clauses I had expertly and flawlessly woven into the dense fine print. I calmly instruct the nervous waiter to review the brightly highlighted sections which explicitly state that Howard and Carolyn hold the sole primary financial responsibility for every single expense incurred during all pre-wedding events. I make it abundantly crystal clear that my personal name has been legally and entirely removed from all financial guarantees, leaving my parents completely and utterly exposed. The waiter quickly reads the highlighted text, his eyes widening slightly as he fully comprehends the airtight, aggressive legal transfer of total liability. Unsure of exactly how to proceed with such an unusually complex situation, he discreetly signals for the restaurant general manager. A tall, distinguished man in a sharp, bespoke suit quickly approaches our small table, hoping to quietly and swiftly mediate the rapidly escalating dispute. The manager begins to carefully review the signed legal contract, but as he leans over the table, his sharp gaze suddenly locks directly onto Bennett. The manager freezes completely solid. He does not see a simple blue-collar worker sitting in a faded green flannel shirt. He recognizes the absolute highest apex of the elite corporate food chain. As a senior executive in this highly elite hospitality group, the manager is fully and completely aware that Bennett is the major anonymous billionaire investor whose vast capital effectively keeps this entire restaurant group afloat. The manager visibly pales, instantly recognizing that the quiet, rugged man sitting casually by the kitchen doors possesses the absolute, unquestionable authority to permanently terminate his entire career with a single brief phone call. Bennett offers the truly terrified manager a very subtle, almost imperceptible silent nod, instructing him to proceed exactly according to the binding legal document presented on the table. The manager immediately straightens his posture, his professional demeanor shifting rapidly from an accommodating mediator to a ruthless corporate enforcer. He picks up the heavy leather folder and the signed contract, executing a crisp, sharp pivot away from our tiny table. He marches directly across the completely silent dining room toward the opulent VIP table. He places the staggering $18,000 bill firmly and loudly down directly in front of my mother. He speaks with absolute cold, unwavering professionalism, informing her that the specific contract she willfully signed is entirely legally binding and completely irrefutable under state law. He states very clearly that she and her husband are the sole designated financial guarantors for the entire extravagant evening. When my mother begins to loudly, frantically protest and angrily demand that I be forced to pay the tab, the manager cuts her off with zero hesitation. He dramatically lowers his voice to a highly dangerous, authoritative timbre, promising to immediately summon local law enforcement to legally resolve the blatant theft of premium services if the massive tab is not settled in full within the next 5 exact minutes. The vibrant color violently and instantly drains from my mother's face as the terrifying threat of police intervention in front of the highly esteemed Prescott family fully settles in her panicked mind. Total unadulterated panic completely eclipses her earlier suffocating arrogance. Howard turns a deep, violent shade of crimson, furiously rummaging through his tailored suit jacket for his leather wallet. The fragile facade of their unlimited fake wealth shatters spectacularly in real continuous time. They are brutally forced to empty their wallets, laying out multiple different credit cards to desperately cobble together the massive $18,000 payment. They frantically and aggressively split the astronomical cost across 3 different high-interest accounts, silently praying in terror that none of the plastic cards decline in front of Judge Prescott. The highly distinguished judge and his elegant wife watched the deeply humiliating frantic scramble with profound quiet disgust, entirely and utterly repulsed by the chaotic financial mismanagement and the sheer undeniable cruelty that ultimately caused it. Devin looks utterly and completely humiliated to be publicly associated with such a disastrous, trashy display, rubbing his forehead in deep, overwhelming distress. As the restaurant staff runs the multiple credit cards to process the highly painful transaction, my mother slowly turns her rigid head to look at me across the quiet room. Her eyes are dark, hollow, staring pools of pure, unadulterated, boiling hatred. She is physically vibrating with a suppressed, silent, violent rage, finally realizing she has been brilliantly and flawlessly outmaneuvered by the very daughter she viciously sought to destroy. She glares at me with a deeply venomous intensity, silently promising absolute total destruction the moment the sun rises tomorrow morning. She truly believes this massive financial humiliation is the absolute worst damage I can possibly inflict upon her. She has absolutely no idea that this $18,000 bill is merely a tiny preliminary warning scratch. She does not know that the true catastrophic apocalyptic trap is waiting patiently for her at the dawn of the new day. I simply meet her furious, burning gaze and offer her a polite, perfectly chilling, knowing smile, leaning back into the comforting, warm presence of my billionaire fiancé as the heavy curtain closes on her highly disastrous rehearsal dinner. The sun has barely begun to crest over the towering Chicago skyline when my digital alarm softly chimes at exactly 6 in the morning. Today is the official day of Riley's stolen engagement party. I am already fully awake, sitting quietly at my sleek kitchen island, with a steaming cup of black coffee, watching the glowing screens of my dual-monitor workstation. I am not anxious. I am perfectly calm, resting in the quiet satisfaction of a strategist waiting for the very first heavy domino to fall. At exactly 1 minute past 6, my customized email server confirms the successful delivery of a highly secured automated message. The email was dispatched directly from the elite executive management tier of the Grand Monarch Hotel straight into my mother's personal inbox. I personally helped draft the precise corporate language myself, ensuring it carried the absolute heavy weight of undeniable legal and financial authority. The automated email is a masterpiece of ruthless corporate policy, perfectly designed to strike at the absolute core of their deepest insecurities. Citing the highly chaotic and publicly humiliating credit card scramble that occurred at the Michelin star restaurant the previous night, the hotel management has officially flagged Carolyn and Howard as a severe high-risk financial liability. The message coldly informs them that the ultimate anonymous owner of the luxury property has personally triggered a mandatory risk assessment protocol for their upcoming massive event. To proceed with the lavish engagement party they hijacked from me, the hotel absolutely requires a non-refundable cash deposit of $250,000 to serve as a comprehensive damage and liability guarantee. The terms outlined in the email are brutally strict, demanding the massive wire transfer be completed by exactly noon today. The message explicitly states that if the funds do not clear the bank by the strict midday deadline, the entire event will be unceremoniously canceled, the vendors will be turned away, and the grand ballroom doors will be permanently locked. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my dark coffee, picturing the absolute sheer terror currently erupting inside my parents' pristine suburban house. I know their exact financial portfolio significantly better than they do. They have spent their entire adult lives projecting an incredibly fragile illusion of boundless wealth, constantly leveraging high-interest debt and remortgaging assets just to maintain their fake country club status. They simply do not have $250,000 in liquid cash just sitting in a bank account waiting to be deployed. Raising that kind of massive capital in a matter of 6 hours on a weekend morning is a complete mathematical impossibility. Howard will be screaming at his laptop screen right now, completely tearing his hair out as the terrifying reality of total unmitigated bankruptcy stares him directly in the face. They cannot secure a commercial loan fast enough to meet the deadline. They cannot pawn their heavily leveraged luxury cars. The impending social execution of having to call Devon and the highly distinguished Prescott family to cancel a luxury engagement party due to a pathetic lack of basic funds will absolutely shatter their fragile, superficial world into a million tiny, unrecoverable pieces. As the early morning minutes tick by, the glowing tracking dashboard on my secondary monitor suddenly flashes with a bright red security alert. The sharp notification informs me of an unexpected unauthorized login attempt pinging my personal cloud network. I trace the physical origin of the signal instantly using my security software. It is coming directly from the unique Internet Protocol address associated with my parents' suburban home. A cold, sharp smile spreads slowly across my face. I left an old, obsolete iPad tucked away in the bottom drawer of my childhood bedroom years ago, intentionally abandoning the outdated piece of hardware when I originally moved out. I knew Riley harbored a deeply toxic, lifelong habit of snooping through my personal belongings whenever she felt threatened, cornered, or insecure. In her desperate, frantic state, reeling from the catastrophic $250,000 ransom demand, she has clearly convinced herself that I am somehow illegally hacking the hotel booking system to maliciously sabotage her special day. I watch the real-time access logs scroll rapidly across my dark screen, painting a perfectly clear picture of her frantic, erratic actions. Riley is currently treating that old tablet like a digital lifeline, desperately hunting for any possible leverage she can weaponize against me to save her doomed party. She is undoubtedly tearing through my old local files, praying to stumble upon highly sensitive public relations client secrets, confidential corporate strategies, or private non-disclosure agreement breaches. She wants absolute devastating blackmail material to force me to call off the hotel management and reverse the massive financial demand. She is trying to play a high-stakes game of corporate extortion without possessing a single ounce of the required intellect or strategic foresight. What Riley does not know is that my overall cloud architecture is meticulously and professionally compartmentalized. She will never find a single shred of vulnerable client data on that abandoned device. Instead, she is currently navigating blindly through a carefully curated digital maze that I forgot to wipe clean. I watch the server logs indicate that she has successfully bypassed the old simple 4-digit passcode I used in college. She is now digging incredibly deep into the archived document folders, searching frantically for a smoking gun that does not exist. She skips rapidly over old college essays, outdated marketing portfolios, and mundane recipe collections. Her panic is palpable even through the digital tracking metrics. Then the tracking software shows her clicking directly into a highly classified, isolated financial directory that I deliberately neglected to unlink from the master cloud drive when I upgraded my systems last year. The specific folder she just opened is not filled with my corporate crisis management plans or standard public relations campaigns. It is a deeply complex, heavily encrypted financial portfolio directory. I watch the digital footprint of her frantic tapping as she opens the primary file index. She is fully expecting to find my personal banking details, secret credit card debt records, or perhaps an embarrassing medical history she can parade in front of the family. Instead, she is staring directly at a master folder titled simply with Bennett's full legal name. I lean back in my ergonomic desk chair, keeping my eyes completely glued to the flashing access log on my monitor. I can perfectly envision Riley squinting at the glowing screen of the old iPad, entirely confused and deeply suspicious. She cannot fathom why my rugged, seemingly impoverished fiancé has a highly classified financial directory hidden deep within my secure personal records. She firmly believes Bennett is nothing more than a lowly, uneducated property manager who wears cheap flannel shirts and lacks the basic refinement to afford a proper suit for a rehearsal dinner. She is completely unaware that she has just breached the outermost perimeter of a massive corporate vault. The folder she is currently viewing contains the foundational breadcrumbs of a national empire, a digital map leading straight to the absolute highest tier of commercial real estate dominance. The sheer monumental stupidity of her current action is truly staggering to witness in real time. Riley is so entirely blinded by her own malicious intent to aggressively blackmail me that she is unwittingly stepping directly onto a massive hidden landmine. She thinks she is gathering petty ammunition to use against a mid-level public relations worker and a blue-collar laborer. She has absolutely no comprehension of the catastrophic scale of the entity she is currently attempting to investigate. The $250,000 hotel demand was merely the opening salvo, a heavy blunt instrument designed specifically to force them into a tight corner of absolute desperation and panic. The simple folder she is currently looking at represents the precise surgical blade that will finalize their total social destruction. She is staring right at his name, trying to connect the dots between the massive luxury hotel ransom demand and the unassuming man my mother viciously mocked by the kitchen doors just 12 hours ago. The digital logs show her pausing, lingering on the folder title as her desperate mind tries to process the incongruity of the information. She is standing right on the precipice of a revelation that will shatter her entire reality. I watch the blinking cursor on my security dashboard, perfectly tracking every single frantic swipe of her finger across the cracked glass of that old tablet screen. Riley is completely driven by a toxic cocktail of raging jealousy and mounting dread. The clock is relentlessly ticking toward the hotel's strict noon deadline, and her desperate search for a quick, dirty solution has just led her straight into the heart of a terrifying corporate labyrinth. She is hovering over the master directory, staring at Bennett's full name, completely unable to understand why it sits protected behind layers of advanced encryption software. She has spent her entire life underestimating everyone around her, always assuming she is the smartest, most important person in any given room. Her profound arrogance has always been her greatest weakness, and now it is serving as the absolute perfect catalyst for her own spectacular downfall. As the server registers her lingering presence inside the directory, I take another slow sip of my coffee, feeling the dark, rich warmth settle in my chest. The trap is now flawlessly and perfectly primed. The undeniable truth is sitting right there on the screen, waiting for her to make the final, fatal connection. I remain utterly silent in the stillness of my sophisticated apartment, allowing the invisible digital web to wrap securely around my sister's malicious curiosity. The sheer poetic justice of her uncovering her own impending ruin through an act of attempted espionage is a flawlessly beautiful conclusion to her decades of unearned privilege. Riley glares at the glowing screen of the old tablet. She taps her perfectly manicured fingernail against the tempered glass, completely bewildered by the digital dead end she has just hit. The master directory labeled with Bennett's full legal name sits right there in front of her, but every single subfolder remains locked behind heavy military-grade encryption. A harsh red error message flashes across the screen each time, firmly denying her access. She throws her hands up in utter frustration, letting out a sharp groan of defeat. She expected to easily uncover a trove of embarrassing financial debt or a hidden criminal record she could instantly weaponize. Instead, she is staring at a digital fortress she cannot possibly breach. Carolyn paces frantically behind her, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee. The clock on the kitchen wall ticks relentlessly toward the strict noon deadline for the $250,000 hotel deposit. My mother is practically vibrating with raw anxiety, her usual polished suburban facade cracking under the immense pressure of impending financial ruin. She demands to know if Riley has found anything useful that they can use to force me to call off the hotel management. Riley shakes her head aggressively, tossing the locked tablet onto the pristine marble kitchen counter. She complains that the only thing she found was a stupid locked folder with my loser boyfriend's name on it. Carolyn stops pacing, Her eyes narrow as she stares at the discarded tablet. A dangerous mix of desperation and malice flickers across her face. She suggests that if my seemingly impoverished fiancé requires advanced encryption software to hide his financial records, he must be concealing something incredibly illegal. Carolyn orders Riley to pull out her smartphone and simply search his name on the internet. She is absolutely convinced that a quick web search will reveal a history of evictions, bankruptcies, or minor arrests that they can threaten to expose to his employer. Riley snatches her phone from the counter and opens her web browser. She quickly types Bennett Hayes into the search bar, her fingers flying across the digital keyboard with malicious intent. She fully expects the results to yield a handful of obscure local business listings, or perhaps a generic social media profile featuring him posing in his cheap flannel shirts. She presses the search button and waits for the screen to load. The search results populate instantly and strike them both with the devastating force of a physical blow. Riley gasps, stepping backward as if the phone in her hand has suddenly caught fire. Carolyn rushes forward, ripping the device from her daughter's grip to read the screen herself. There are no obscure business directories or embarrassing public records. Instead, the tiny glowing screen is completely flooded with thousands of high-level financial articles, prestigious corporate profiles, and breaking market news. The very first result is a comprehensive, in-depth feature published by Forbes magazine. The bold headline praises the ruthless brilliance of the elusive billionaire founder and chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. Right beneath the headline is a crystal-clear, high-resolution photograph of Bennett. He is wearing a sharply tailored dark suit, looking directly into the camera with the exact same quiet, predatory intelligence he displayed while sitting by the kitchen doors last night. Carolyn's hands begin to shake violently. The phone rattles against her rings as she scrolls frantically through the endless stream of staggering information. She clicks on a recent article from the Wall Street Journal detailing a massive corporate acquisition. The text explicitly names Apex Holdings as the undisputed parent company of the Grand Monarch luxury hotel brand. A second article highlights the corporation's aggressive expansion into the southern real estate market, specifically referencing their ultimate authority over a highly anticipated community development project in Atlanta. The absolute horrific magnitude of their catastrophic mistake crashes down upon them in real time. The suffocating air in the pristine suburban kitchen grows incredibly heavy. Carolyn drops the phone onto the counter, her knees suddenly giving out. She grips the edge of the marble island to keep from collapsing entirely to the floor. The chaotic puzzle pieces violently snap into place, forming a picture of inescapable doom. She realizes with bone-chilling clarity that she did not just insult a random blue-collar worker. She publicly humiliated a corporate titan who wields absolute unyielding control over her entire manufactured reality. She remembers explicitly ordering the restaurant manager to drop an $18,000 bill onto his table. She remembers looking down her nose at his flannel shirt and loudly mocking his perceived poverty in front of the highly distinguished Prescott family. She realizes that the cold automated ransom email demanding $250,000 from the ultimate owner of the hotel was not a random corporate policy. It was a direct, targeted execution ordered by the exact man she had banished to the shadows. The horror deepens as Riley reads the details of the Atlanta real estate project out loud. The blood completely drains from Riley's face. She connects the name Apex Holdings directly to the frantic, anxious conversations Devin has been having with his parents. She realizes that Bennett is the exact anonymous billionaire holding the absolute power of life and death over the Prescott family legacy. The man she loudly insulted in the hotel lobby, calling him a pathetic nobody who did not deserve a luxury venue, is the very man holding the keys to her future in-law's kingdom. She just handed her fiancé a loaded gun and painted a massive target directly on her own back. Total, unadulterated panic completely consumes my mother. The polished veneer of her high society persona evaporates, leaving behind a terrified, desperate woman staring straight into the abyss of absolute social and financial annihilation. She grabs her phone with trembling, erratic movements and immediately dials my number. She paces wildly across the kitchen floor, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps. Miles away in the serene quiet of my high-rise apartment, I sit comfortably on my velvet sofa. My phone rests face up on the glass coffee table, buzzing aggressively against the smooth surface. The screen flashes with my mother's name. I do not reach for it. I do not press the button to answer or the button to decline. I simply let it ring, watching the incoming call alert pulse with rhythmic urgency. I wait patiently for the inevitable transition. A few seconds later, the ringing stops, and the voicemail recording icon illuminates the screen. I press the speaker button, allowing her voice to fill the calm atmosphere of my living room. The audio quality is slightly distorted by her sheer volume. Carolyn is screaming into the receiver, her voice a chaotic, harrowing mixture of unhinged sobbing, frantic begging, and raw, absolute panic. She wails my name over and over, desperately pleading for me to pick up the phone. She cries out that it was all a terrible misunderstanding, a massive, horrible joke gone wrong. She begs me to talk to Bennett to make him stop the hotel management from enforcing the ruinous deadline. She frantically promises to pay for my entire wedding, to give me back the venue, to do whatever I want, if I just save her from this total destruction. The sound of her total collapse is not beautiful or satisfying. It is simply pathetic, the sound of a bully who has finally realized she picked a fight with a heavily armed predator. I listen to her frantic meltdown with cold, absolute detachment. I do not feel a single ounce of pity or remorse. I simply file her desperate words away as confirmation that the psychological trap has successfully snapped shut. Bennett steps out of the master bedroom and walks into the living area. He has traded his usual faded denim and worn flannel for a perfectly tailored midnight blue evening jacket and crisp, dark trousers. He looks incredibly sharp, exuding the refined, commanding presence of a man who controls an empire. He listens to the final hysterical seconds of my mother's voicemail before the automated system cuts her off. He adjusts the crisp cuffs of his shirt, his movements smooth and deliberately paced. He fastens a pair of heavy silver cufflinks, securing the elegant fabric at his wrists. He looks down at the silenced phone and then back up at me. A cold, highly predatory smile slowly spreads across his handsome face, perfectly reflecting the ruthless corporate strategy we have seamlessly executed together. "They Googled my name," he says softly, his voice carrying a dark, thrilling undertone of ultimate victory. I stand up from the sofa, smoothing the fabric of my own immaculate evening gown. We have pushed them to the absolute brink of total madness, stripping away their arrogance and replacing it with pure, unadulterated terror. They are currently drowning in a sea of massive debt and impending social ruin, waiting desperately for a lifeline I will never throw. The stage is flawlessly set for the grand finale. I pick up my designer evening bag and meet his intense, calculating gaze. I offer him a cool, confident nod, confirming our mutual readiness to deliver the final, devastating blow. He offers me his arm, his posture radiating unstoppable authority. "It is time to attend the party," he says, leading us out the door toward the spectacular destruction awaiting us at the hotel. The luxurious black town car glides smoothly to a halt beneath the towering illuminated portico of the Grand Monarch. The crisp evening air of Chicago bites at my skin as I step out onto the pristine cobblestone driveway, but the cold is entirely welcome. It sharpens my senses and heightens the absolute crystalline focus required for the imminent social execution. Beside me, Bennett steps out of the vehicle, projecting a terrifyingly calm authority. He is no longer the unassuming man absorbing insults by a drafty kitchen door. He moves with the silent, predatory grace of a corporate titan, stepping directly onto his own sovereign territory. The towering glass and brass doors of the hotel slide open automatically, welcoming us into the spectacular warmth of the grand lobby. The atmosphere inside the building is electric, completely saturated with the heavy scent of imported floral arrangements and the low, sophisticated hum of arriving high society guests. We navigate the opulent corridors leading toward the primary grand ballroom. The visual contrast between my parents' manufactured suburban wealth and the authentic generational opulence of this specific property has never been more aggressively apparent. As we round the final corner, approaching the velvet ropes of the primary event entrance, my highly calibrated public relations instincts immediately detect the frantic, chaotic energy bleeding into the corridor. Carolyn and Howard are stationed directly outside the massive carved wooden doors of the ballroom. They are completely ignoring the arriving guests, frantically pacing the patterned carpet like trapped animals facing a rapidly approaching executioner. The sheer level of absolute terror radiating from their rigid postures is a stunning spectacle to witness. The crushing weight of the $250,000 ransom demand has entirely stripped away their carefully curated, haughty facades. Their faces are pale, their movements erratic, and their eyes continuously dart toward the main hallway with raw, unadulterated desperation. They are drowning in the terrifying reality of their impending financial annihilation, desperately scanning the crowd for the single man holding their entire existence in his hands. The exact fraction of a second my mother spots Bennett walking down the corridor, her entire physical demeanor undergoes a grotesquely fascinating transformation. The deep, furious venom she displayed at the rehearsal dinner vanishes instantly, entirely replaced by a sickeningly sweet, desperate sycophancy. She physically shoves past a group of elegantly dressed attendees, completely abandoning all pretense of high society etiquette. Howard follows closely behind her, his face stretched into a wide, unnatural grimace of sheer panic, disguised as welcoming joy. They practically sprint toward us, their arms outstretched, resembling a pair of drowning sailors lunging for a solid wooden lifeboat. Carolyn loudly orchestrates her performative greeting, ensuring her shrill voice carries across the crowded entrance hall to be witnessed by the affluent guests filtering into the venue. She aggressively attempts to close the physical distance between us, her arms wide open, aiming to wrap me in a highly theatrical display of profound maternal affection. She loudly proclaims how incredibly relieved she is that her beautiful eldest daughter and her absolutely beloved future son-in-law have finally arrived to grace their humble celebration. The sheer whiplash of her sudden, sickening adoration is staggering. Just 12 hours ago, she was publicly mocking Bennett and demanding I pay an astronomical restaurant bill. Now she is loudly singing his praises to a corridor full of prominent strangers, desperately attempting to rewrite history and associate herself with his massive billionaire status. I do not break my stride, and I absolutely do not allow her frantic, grasping hands to make contact with my body. Drawing on years of navigating hostile corporate environments, I execute a flawless, subtle pivot. I shift my weight and step smoothly out of her direct trajectory, denying her the physical connection she so desperately needs to validate her performance. Her hands catch nothing but empty air, leaving her stumbling slightly forward in her expensive evening gown. The public rejection is immediate and brutally visible to the surrounding attendees. Simultaneously, Howard attempts his own pathetic maneuver. He steps directly into Bennett's path, thrusting his right hand forward in a vigorous, firm gesture, meant to project the image of a proud, welcoming patriarch. He loudly welcomes Bennett to the family celebration, eagerly trying to usher him toward the exclusive velvet-roped entrance designated for the elite guests of honor. Howard desperately needs the passing members of the prominent Prescott family to see him shaking hands with the incredibly powerful chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. He needs the visual optics of an intimate family bond to secure his fragile social standing. Bennett does not break his stride, he does not slow down, and he absolutely does not raise his hand to meet my father's desperate greeting. Bennett simply keeps walking, his sharp, intelligent eyes looking entirely right through Howard, as if my father is nothing more than a transparent pane of glass. He glides past the outstretched hand with a terrifyingly cold, dismissive elegance, leaving Howard standing frozen in the middle of the crowded corridor, with his hands suspended awkwardly in the empty air. The absolute suffocating silence of Bennett's refusal is far more devastating than any shouted insult or angry confrontation could ever be. It is the ultimate display of untouchable power, completely stripping Howard of his remaining dignity in front of the highly observant high society crowd. Carolyn quickly recovers from her initial stumble, her panic escalating into sheer frantic desperation. She scurries alongside us, her voice dropping into a breathless, frantic whisper, heavily disguised by a wide, frozen smile. She begs us to follow her to the head table, insisting that she has reserved the absolute best premium seating in the entire grand ballroom specifically for us. She gestures wildly toward the extravagant floral arches marking the VIP section, attempting to physically herd us toward the center of the room, where the elite members of the Prescott family are currently gathering. She is utterly terrified that the distinguished judges and corporate executives in attendance will notice the massive gaping rift between her and the billionaire owner of the venue. She needs us seated at her side to legitimize her stolen event and to silently beg for financial mercy regarding the massive deposit demand. I maintain my icy, unreadable composure, perfectly mirroring Bennett's unyielding strength. We do not speak a single word to them. We do not acknowledge their frantic whispering or their desperate guiding gestures. We step through the magnificent carved doors and enter the glittering grand ballroom entirely on our own terms. The space is a breathtaking marvel of architectural beauty, flooded with golden light and overflowing with the extravagant luxury my parents foolishly purchased on their own liability. Instead of walking toward the elevated staging area and the lavishly decorated head table, where Carolyn is desperately trying to lead us, Bennett and I deliberately alter our course. We bypass the heavily guarded VIP section, entirely walking straight past the towering centerpieces and the personalized place cards my mother hastily rearranged this morning. We navigate through the sea of elegantly dressed guests, moving methodically toward the absolute farthest edge of the massive ballroom. We deliberately select a small, unassuming table located on the extreme outer periphery of the room, nestled deeply in the shadows away from the primary spotlight. It is the exact structural equivalent of the drafty kitchen table they maliciously forced us to endure the previous night. The poetic symmetry of the seating choice is profound and devastatingly intentional. We are willingly banishing ourselves to the shadows, completely rejecting their frantic attempts to showcase our presence. We sit down at the peripheral table, projecting an aura of quiet, untouchable royalty, observing the magnificent room from a distance. Carolyn and Howard are left standing completely alone in the center of the grand ballroom aisle. They are entirely paralyzed by the sheer public humiliation of their failed performance. The surrounding elite guests, including several high-ranking members of the prestigious Prescott family, are actively watching the bizarre interaction unfold. The social currency my parents desperately tried to manufacture has instantly evaporated. They are forced to stand under the bright, glittering chandeliers and endure the agonizing social embarrassment of watching their most honored family members blatantly and publicly reject their hospitality. The whispers begin to ripple through the elegantly dressed crowd, soft murmurs of confusion and judgment, directed entirely at my trembling parents. Carolyn's face flushes a deep mottled red, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the stark terror and profound humiliation radiating from her wide eyes. She realizes, with crushing, absolute certainty, that her golden child's perfect engagement party is completely, entirely out of her control. She cannot force us to the head table without causing a massive vulgar scene, and she cannot pay the $250,000 ransom hanging over her head. She is trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, forced to smile at passing strangers while watching the billionaire holding her execution orders sit quietly in the shadows. Bennett rests his hand over mine on the pristine white tablecloth, his dark eyes tracking the frantic, terrified movements of my parents across the room. We sit in perfect harmonious silence, watching the very first structural pillars of their toxic kingdom begin to violently and spectacularly collapse. I sit perfectly still in the dim lighting of the peripheral table, allowing the heavy tension in the grand ballroom to fully marinate. The glittering chandeliers above cast a brilliant golden glow over the hundreds of elite guests, but my focus remains entirely internalized. It is time to execute the next phase of our calculated retaliation. I stand up slowly, drawing the collective attention of the nearby tables. With deliberate and measured precision, I unbutton the long, dark, tailored wool coat I have been wearing since we arrived at the luxury hotel. I let the heavy winter fabric slide smoothly off my shoulders, folding it neatly over the curved back of my dining chair. Beneath the thick coat, I am wearing the true, authentic version of my custom-designed haute couture evening gown. It is a breathtaking masterpiece of structural dark silk and hand-beaded lace that falls flawlessly against my silhouette. I commissioned this exact exquisite design from a brilliant independent creator in New York, intending it to be the central masterpiece of my wardrobe. It projects an aura of absolute uncompromising elegance and fierce independence. The deep midnight fabric catches the ambient ballroom light, shimmering with a subtle, commanding authority that instantly demands profound respect from anyone looking in my direction. Across the massive ballroom, Riley is currently parading around the central dance floor in her stolen garment. She is wearing the mutilated remains of my original white wedding dress, the one she ruthlessly hacked apart and aggressively pinned together in her childhood bedroom just a few short days ago. From a vast distance, she might have foolishly believed it looked acceptable. But under the harsh, unforgiving illumination of the professional venue, lighting, the crude alterations are catastrophically obvious to everyone. The jagged scissor cuts along the delicate neckline are visibly fraying, shedding tiny white silk threads onto the highly polished wood floor. The heavy silver safety pins she used to violently cinch the loose bodice are completely exposed, catching the bright light and highlighting the cheap, chaotic nature of her malicious theft. The dress hangs awkwardly on her frame, lacking any of the graceful architectural structure it originally possessed. She looks exactly like a desperate imposter wearing a stolen costume that does not belong to her. The visual contrast between my immaculate dark silk gown and her ruined white dress is exceptionally stark and deeply symbolic. I am projecting the quiet, refined power of a self-made crisis strategist, while she is loudly broadcasting the frantic, unearned entitlement of a spoiled child wearing stolen goods. The high society guests filling the room are highly observant individuals accustomed to analyzing social dynamics and subtle displays of wealth. A distinct ripple of hushed whispers begins to spread organically through the elegant crowd. Distinguished attendees turn their heads subtly, pointing their expensive champagne flutes directly in my direction. They openly admire the sharp, breathtaking sophistication of my attire and immediately compare it to the disorganized, frantic energy radiating from the center of the room. The prestigious Prescott family seated at the prominent front table is entirely aware of the shifting atmosphere and the growing quiet judgment. Judge Kenneth Prescott watches me from afar, noting my calm professional posture and my absolute refusal to engage in my parents' desperate social climbing tactics. He then looks back at Riley, observing her loud, forced laughter and the visibly ruined state of her highly inappropriate evening gown. The collective judgment of the elite crowd is completely silent, but overwhelmingly palpable in the heavy air. My sister has spent her entire life thriving on the unconditional, blinding adoration of our parents, but she is currently drowning in the unspoken critical scrutiny of Chicago high society. She is rapidly losing her grip on the spotlight she so ruthlessly stole from me. Riley is fiercely addicted to being the absolute center of the universe. She possesses a fragile, toxic ego that requires constant external validation to survive. As she notices the prestigious guests diverting their attention away from her and pointing discreetly toward my table in the shadows, a dark, ugly panic begins to rapidly consume her. She is already operating under the crushing psychological weight of the $250,000 ransom demand hanging directly over her head. She knows the hotel financial deadline has officially passed, and she is absolutely terrified that the grand doors could be permanently locked by management at any second. Her severe financial anxiety aggressively collides with her raging, burning jealousy. She cannot fathom how her older sister, the perpetual family scapegoat, is effortlessly commanding the respect and admiration of the room without speaking a single word. Her fake polished smile violently cracks, transforming into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. She glares at me across the crowded ballroom, her breathing becoming shallow and highly erratic. She completely abandons the distinguished Prescott relatives she was desperately trying to charm just moments ago. Her singular obsessive focus narrows entirely onto destroying my quiet, triumphant presence. Driven absolutely mad by her own suffocating insecurities, Riley loses her temper completely and spectacularly in front of hundreds of people. She abandons all established protocols of high society etiquette, deciding to blindly weaponize her perceived authority as the guest of honor. She marches aggressively toward the outer perimeter of the ballroom, waving her arms wildly to attract the immediate attention of the hotel security personnel. She signals fiercely to a group of muscular men wearing dark suits and discreet earpieces stationed near the main entrance. Riley points a trembling, furious finger directly at my table, loudly screaming across the elegant, quiet space. She demands that the security guards forcibly remove me from the premises immediately. She hysterically accuses me of intentionally ruining her night, of illegally trespassing on her private event, and of deliberately trying to sabotage her monumental engagement. Her shrill, piercing voice cuts violently through the sophisticated classical music playing in the background, causing dozens of wealthy guests to stop their conversations and stare in absolute profound horror. My parents. Howard and Carolyn freeze entirely in the center of the room, completely paralyzed by the sheer vulgarity of their golden child having a public meltdown. They are watching their carefully constructed illusion of aristocratic refinement shatter into a million jagged, irrecoverable pieces. The head of the hotel security detail, a tall, imposing man with decades of crisis management experience, immediately steps forward to address the loud, unseemly disturbance. He walks briskly across the polished floor, flanked by two highly trained officers, navigating the wealthy crowd with absolute professional efficiency. Riley stands nearby, crossing her arms over her ruined white dress, looking incredibly smug and highly victorious. She fully expects the guards to aggressively grab my shoulders and drag me out of the beautiful building in total disgrace. She eagerly anticipates my absolute public humiliation, waiting desperately for the satisfying crunch of my complete destruction. I do not move a single muscle in my chair. I do not reach for my designer purse or attempt to flee the building to avoid the incoming conflict. I sit perfectly still, my hands resting elegantly in my lap, projecting total unbothered calm. Bennett remains casually seated beside me, projecting an aura of terrifying, absolute stillness. The head of security arrives directly at our small peripheral table. He does not reach for my arm or brandish a weapon. He does not utter a single word of reprimand or ask to see a printed invitation. Instead, he executes a crisp, precise military pivot, completely ignoring Riley and her frantic screaming commands. He turns his large, intimidating frame directly toward Bennett. The imposing security director lowers his head in a deep, highly respectful bow of absolute unwavering subservience. He addresses my unassuming fiancé with profound, quiet reverence, firmly ignoring the chaotic suburban melodrama unfolding right behind him. He calmly asks Bennett for his direct executive orders regarding the highly disruptive guest currently screaming in the center of his property. The sheer catastrophic reality of the hidden power dynamic instantly drops over the grand ballroom like a heavy, suffocating iron blanket. Riley is left standing entirely alone in the middle of the glittering floor, her mouth hanging wide open in utter, profound shock. Her smug, victorious expression is violently ripped away and instantly replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. She looks incredibly small, powerless, and entirely deranged, stripped of all her unearned fake authority in front of hundreds of elite guests. She realizes with crushing absolute certainty that the elite security team does not answer to her or her stolen credit card deposit. They answer exclusively and permanently to the rugged man sitting quietly in the shadows. Standing near the beautiful floral arches at the prestigious VIP table, Devin watches the entire disturbing behavior unfold from a very safe distance. He observes Riley screaming like a petulant child, her stolen dress visibly fraying at the uneven seams, her toxic cruelty fully exposed under the bright crystal chandeliers. He watches her attempt to ruthlessly eject her own sister from the building using armed guards over pure petty jealousy. He sees the ugly, vicious reality of the woman he intended to marry, entirely stripped of her sweet, innocent, carefully manufactured facade. The heavy gears of profound realization begin turning visibly in Devin's sharp, intelligent eyes as he watches the absolute total collapse of my sister's deeply toxic and entirely fraudulent kingdom. The profound shock rippling through the grand ballroom remains palpable as the head of security steps back, awaiting further instruction from the man in the dark evening jacket, sitting quietly beside me. Riley stands frozen in the center of the polished floor, her chest heaving as the absolute reality of her powerlessness begins to violently take root in her mind. Her frantic attempts to weaponize the hotel staff against me have failed spectacularly, leaving her totally exposed under the brilliant crystal chandeliers. She realizes that her manufactured authority means absolutely nothing in this highly exclusive space. From his vantage point, near the elegant floral arches, Devon continues to watch his fiancée with a highly disturbing clarity. The polished, sweet illusion she meticulously maintained throughout their entire courtship has completely evaporated, revealing the frantic, malicious core of her true character. He rapidly processes the stark, undeniable contrast between the sophisticated woman he intended to marry and the unhinged, aggressive individual currently standing before him in a ruined, stolen dress. The tension in the vast room is stretched to an unbearable degree when the heavy carved wooden doors at the main entrance swing open once again, signaling the highly anticipated arrival of the most distinguished guests of the evening. The atmosphere instantly shifts as the prominent African American family from Atlanta crosses the threshold, stepping directly into the suffocating aftermath of my sister's chaotic public meltdown. Judge Kenneth Prescott enters the magnificent space accompanied by his elegant wife, projecting an immediate aura of quiet generational authority and profound intellectual dignity. They carry themselves with a refined grace that commands absolute respect without requiring a single ounce of loud theatrical effort. Carolyn and Howard immediately snap out of their paralyzed horror regarding the security incident. Driven by sheer desperate survival instinct, my parents frantically attempt to execute a massive, rapid social pivot, desperately hoping to salvage their rapidly deteriorating public image. They abandon Riley completely and rush aggressively toward the main entrance, their faces contorting into wide, panicked, unnatural smiles. They practically throw themselves into the path of the esteemed judge, desperately attempting to intercept the prestigious couple before they can fully absorb the toxic chaos lingering heavily in the ballroom. Carolyn straightens her designer gown and eagerly reaches out, aiming to warmly embrace the judge's wife in a grotesque, embarrassing display of manufactured intimacy. Howard forcefully extends his sweating hand, eager to project the false image of a proud, welcoming patriarch. They are both entirely consumed by the frantic need to secure their fragile social standing by physically aligning themselves with the immense power and unblemished, pristine reputation of the distinguished Prescott family. Judge Prescott does not slow his deliberate, measured pace to accommodate my parents' desperate fawning. He gracefully but firmly sidesteps Carolyn's grasping embrace, offering only the most minimal formal acknowledgement required by basic high society etiquette. His sharp, highly intelligent eyes immediately begin scanning the vast, glittering room, expertly analyzing the bizarre, thick tension radiating from the gathered attendees. He takes immediate note of his sons standing near the front tables, projecting deep, visible unease. He observes Riley looking severely disheveled and frantic in the center of the dance floor. Then his commanding, authoritative gaze sweeps toward the outer periphery of the opulent space, sweeping smoothly over the shadows until it lands directly on our small, isolated table. The distinguished judge suddenly stops dead in his tracks. The polite, neutral expression he wore upon entering the venue instantly transforms into a look of profound, absolute astonishment and deep, immediate recognition. He completely ignores my father's outstretched hand, leaving Howard standing incredibly awkwardly in the center of the grand aisle. Judge Prescott purposefully alters his entire trajectory, bypassing the lavishly decorated central tables and the desperate, grasping hands of my parents. He walks with immense, purposeful strides straight across the quiet ballroom, navigating seamlessly through the sea of staring guests directly toward the dark outer edge where Bennett and I remain calmly seated. The entire room watches in absolute breathless silence as the highly respected federal judge approaches our drafty, isolated peripheral table. Carolyn and Howard slowly turn around, their faces rapidly draining of all remaining color as they watch their ultimate social prize willingly march toward the very daughter they maliciously banished to the shadows. When Judge Prescott reaches our table, he does not offer a casual passing greeting or a simple dismissive nod of acquaintance. He gracefully extends his right hand with a gesture of deep, unmistakable, profound reverence, firmly and respectfully addressing the rugged, unassuming man sitting quietly beside me. The judge speaks with profound, immense respect, openly and clearly acknowledging Bennett not as a lowly, struggling property manager, but as the visionary, powerful chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. He expresses his absolute total honor at unexpectedly finding the elusive billionaire leader present at this family gathering, highlighting the immense, sincere gratitude his own family holds for the corporate titan currently reviewing their philanthropic community project. The sheer, catastrophic heavy weight of this public recognition crashes down upon the silent ballroom with the devastating, unyielding force of a physical shockwave. The invisible social hierarchy my mother so ruthlessly engineered shatters instantly and irreparably into a million jagged, irrecoverable tiny pieces. The collective, stunning realization ripples violently through the hundreds of elite guests filling the beautiful room. They stare in profound, absolute horror at my parents rapidly grasping the absolute magnitude of the fatal, catastrophic error Carolyn and Howard have blindly committed. My mother's knees physically buckle under her expensive dress, her manicured hands flying rapidly to her mouth to stifle a loud gasp of pure, unadulterated terror. She finally fully comprehends that she spent the entire previous evening brutally mocking and viciously humiliating the exact billionaire who holds the absolute ultimate power of life and death over her desired future-in-laws. Riley covers her face, trembling uncontrollably, as the true terrifying identity of the man she repeatedly insulted fully solidifies in her frantic racing mind. Bennett accepts the judge's respectful, firm handshake with quiet, grounded, effortless grace before slowly standing up from his chair. He projects an aura of terrifying, absolute, total authority, demanding the undivided, complete attention of every single person standing in the magnificent room. He reaches out smoothly, taking a crystal glass of expensive vintage champagne from a passing waiter who stands perfectly frozen in total shock. With a gentle, deliberate tap against the delicate glass, Bennett signals his intention to command the floor, politely requesting the central microphone to deliver a highly anticipated celebratory family toast. The hotel staff immediately scrambles to comply, handing him the sleek wireless microphone with terrified, rapid efficiency. Bennett stands tall at the edge of the shadows, completely dominating the massive illuminated space without even stepping onto the elevated stage. He does not raise his voice in burning anger. He does not display a single ounce of bitter resentment or petty vindictiveness. Instead, he addresses the captivated crowd with a devastatingly polite, cold, clinical amusement that cuts infinitely deeper than any furious screaming ever could. He begins his eloquent speech by warmly welcoming the esteemed Prescott family to Chicago, heavily praising their profound integrity and their noble philanthropic community endeavors. He then seamlessly, smoothly pivots the focus of his toast directly onto the generous hosts of the evening, smoothly illuminating the grotesque, ugly reality hiding beneath the opulent floral arrangements and the expensive premium catering. With sharp, eloquent, pinpoint precision, he calmly outlines the staggering sequence of events that brought everyone into this beautiful room tonight, ensuring no specific detail is spared. He narrates the incredibly aggressive, malicious theft of the luxury wedding venue, detailing exactly how Carolyn maliciously hijacked the reservation, using a cheap payment technicality to steal the date for her golden child. He politely describes the heartbreaking, devastating discovery of my custom haute couture wedding gown, explaining how it was brutally hacked apart with heavy scissors and crudely pinned together simply to serve as a stolen costume for the evening. He guides the horrified, captive audience through the events of the previous night, painting a vivid, detailed picture of the drafty, cramped table by the kitchen doors, where my parents intentionally banished us to assert their toxic dominance. The wealthy attendees gasp quietly, murmuring among themselves in absolute total disgust, as Bennett casually reveals the malicious petty attempt to force me to pay an astronomical $18,000 restaurant bill out of sheer petty spite. He masterfully lays out the entire extensive catalog of their unhinged abuse, presenting the facts with a detached, relaxed clarity that makes the sheer absurdity of their actions absolutely undeniable and completely impossible to defend. Bennett concludes his devastating toast by briefly mentioning the incredibly aggressive $250,000 liability ransom that currently hangs over my parents' heads, illuminating their desperate, frantic attempts to engage in corporate blackmail earlier that very morning. He paints a flawless, comprehensive portrait of a family completely consumed by profound green, staggering vanity and unchecked pure malice. He describes how their relentless obsession with social status blinded them to the immense value of basic human decency and familial loyalty. He does not demand an apology or ask the crowd for their sympathy. He simply lays the ugly, naked truth completely bare, letting the suffocating weight of their monstrous cruelty hang heavily in the crisp air of the grand ballroom for everyone to intensely judge. The heavy, absolute silence that follows his final words is the most profound sound I have ever experienced. My parents and sister are left standing completely paralyzed, drowning utterly and completely in the inescapable public execution of their own meticulously crafted reputations. They are finally totally exposed to the world exactly as they are, without any defensive shields or protective illusions left to hide behind. The suffocating silence that follows the conclusion of the devastating toast hangs over the grand ballroom like a heavy executioner blade. The absolute magnitude of the monstrous cruelty laid bare under the brilliant crystal chandeliers leaves the hundreds of elite attendees entirely paralyzed. From the shadows of our isolated peripheral table, I watch the immediate and catastrophic fallout ripple through the center of the magnificent room. Devon steps forward from his position near the extravagant floral arches breaking the frozen tableau. His immaculate tailored navy suit stands in sharp, striking contrast to the fraying, butchered white silk of the stolen wedding dress currently worn by the woman he intended to marry. The polished, polite demeanor he has maintained throughout the entire evening has completely vanished. In its place is a look of profound, undeniable disgust that radiates from his sharp, intelligent eyes. I observe the precise moment the heavy puzzle pieces violently snap into place within his mind. The sweet, innocent, flawless facade Riley meticulously constructed throughout their entire courtship evaporates before his very eyes, revealing the calculating, malicious predator lurking just beneath her manufactured surface. He looks at the jagged, crude scissor cuts altering the neckline of my stolen gown, and then looks back at the desperate, trembling woman wearing it. He realizes, with crushing, absolute clarity, that every single aspect of her delicate, wholesome persona was a carefully orchestrated lie designed specifically to secure his wealth and permanently elevate her family into the highest echelons of Atlanta society. Devon closes the physical distance between them, stepping directly into the center of the polished wooden dance floor. The space immediately transforms into a public tribunal. He stops several feet away from Riley, deliberately maintaining a rigid protective barrier of personal space. He gestures sharply toward the dark outer edge of the room, where Bennett and I remain calmly seated in the shadows before pointing a firm, unwavering finger directly at the mutilated silk hanging awkwardly from her frame. He silently and forcefully demands absolute accountability for the breathtaking depravity she and her parents have just been exposed for orchestrating. He refuses to allow her to hide behind her usual pristine high society mask. Riley completely panics under the crushing weight of his intense critical scrutiny. Driven by sheer desperate survival instinct, she immediately deploys her most heavily practiced defense mechanism. She bursts into heavy theatrical tears, her shoulders shaking with violent, exaggerated sobs. She reaches out with trembling, manicured hands, desperately attempting to grasp the lapels of his tailored jacket to anchor herself to his immense social status. Devon physically recoils from her grasping fingers, executing a swift, deliberate step backward that loudly broadcasts his profound revulsion. The visceral rejection visibly shatters her remaining composure. Realizing that her usual tears are entirely failing to manipulate him, Riley frantically pivots her strategy. She points a trembling accusatory finger directly at Carolyn and Howard, who are standing paralyzed just a few yards away. She desperately attempts to weave a frantic, fabricated narrative of total victimhood. She vigorously shakes her head, pointing at her own chest, and then aggressively gesturing toward our parents, actively pantomiming that she was entirely coerced into this malicious scheme. She tries to paint Carolyn and Howard as the tyrannical masterminds behind the venue theft and the dress mutilation, throwing her own mother and father directly under the heavy wheels of public judgment in a pathetic, frantic bid to save her elite engagement. Carolyn and Howard watch in absolute staggering horror as their golden child viciously turns against them in front of the entire high society crowd. Driven by the terrifying prospect of losing their ultimate social prize, they attempt to step forward to somehow salvage the rapidly disintegrating alliance. Before they can even cross the polished floor, Judge Kenneth Prescott raises a single authoritative hand from his seat at the prominent VIP table. The unspoken command from the distinguished federal judge is absolute and unyielding. It freezes my parents perfectly in place, stripping them of their ability to intervene. They are forced to stand silently in their expensive evening wear, watching helplessly as their most valuable asset self-destructs in real time. Devin refocuses his attention entirely on the weeping woman standing before him. He shakes his head with slow, deliberate finality, utterly refusing to be subjected to her frantic, desperate gaslighting. He sees right through her frantic attempts to shift the blame, recognizing that her tears are born entirely out of the terror of getting caught rather than any genuine remorse for the profound cruelty she inflicted upon her own sister. He straightens his posture, projecting the immense quiet dignity and intellectual strength inherited from his prominent family lineage. He begins to systematically dismantle her fragile, toxic facade through the sheer commanding power of his body language. Though his voice does not carry across the massive silent room, his sharp, decisive hand gestures and deeply furious expressions communicate his absolute total revulsion. He indicates the staggering, breathtaking hypocrisy of her actions. The terrifying realization of the deeply toxic classist and racist undertones permeating the entire family dynamic finally crystallizes in his highly observant mind. He comprehends with sickening clarity that my parents eagerly sought to aggressively exploit his prominent African-American family name to elevate their own fragile suburban status, while simultaneously demonstrating a monstrous, limitless capacity for malice toward their own flesh and blood. He understands in that defining moment that a family capable of maliciously banishing their eldest daughter to a drafty kitchen door, mutilating her wedding gown, and attempting to violently extort her for thousands of dollars could never offer him or his family any genuine respect. Their eager acceptance of him was entirely transactional, built on a rotten foundation of profound prejudice, greed, and relentless social climbing. He realizes that if they treat their own blood with such unhinged, staggering malice, their underlying respect for his heritage is nothing more than a convenient, highly prejudiced illusion. Devin extends his right hand toward Riley, his palm facing upward in a silent, unwavering, and absolute demand. The heavy, suffocating silence of the grand ballroom amplifies the intense psychological standoff unfolding under the bright crystal chandeliers. Riley stares at his outstretched hand, her chest heaving with panicked, ragged sobs. She desperately clutches her left hand tightly against her chest, violently refusing to surrender the massive, glittering diamond ring that represents her ultimate societal victory and her only remaining lifeline to extreme wealth. She shakes her head wildly, her carefully styled hair falling into her tear-streaked face, pleading silently for him to reconsider the devastating ultimatum. Devin does not waver a single inch. He drops his hand and points a firm, uncompromising finger directly at the heavy diamond stone catching the bright ballroom light. He holds his ground, projecting an immovable wall of absolute moral boundaries. Defeated, exhausted, and trembling uncontrollably under the crushing weight of his unforgiving gaze, Riley slowly slides the heavy engagement ring off her finger. She attempts to hand the expensive jewelry directly into his palm, desperately hoping for one final fleeting moment of physical contact, but he deliberately refuses to take it from her shaking grasp. He gestures sharply toward the pristine white tablecloth of the nearest abandoned dining table, refusing to let their hands meet. Riley slowly lowers her arm and places the glittering diamond onto the crisp white fabric. The heavy stone lands softly among the empty crystal champagne flutes, completely abandoning the symbol of her manufactured future on a table she did not even pay for. Devon takes a final definitive step away from the woman he almost married. He turns his back on her completely and utterly, offering absolutely no parting embrace, no lingering look of regret, and no opportunity for further manipulation. He severs the connection with a cold, permanent finality that echoes the exact tactical boundary I established with my father earlier this morning. He walks with purposeful, dignified strides back toward the VIP table, where his parents are already standing. Judge Kenneth Prescott and his elegant wife radiate an aura of immaculate, untouchable dignity. They do not spare a single fleeting glance for Carolyn Howard or the weeping, devastated woman left standing in the center of the room. The prestigious family moves together with quiet, unified grace, projecting the unbreakable strength of a lineage built on authentic respect and genuine integrity. The high society guests part instantly like the Red Sea shuffling backward to allow the distinguished family to pass unhindered through the crowded ballroom. The absolute complete social execution of my parents is finalized the exact moment the heavy carved wooden doors of the grand entrance close firmly behind the departing family. The engagement is officially and permanently obliterated. Riley collapses entirely onto the polished wooden dance floor, her knees violently giving out beneath her. She sinks into a miserable, pathetic heap of frayed, stolen silk and sharp, exposed safety pins. She buries her ruined, tear-stained face in her trembling hands, weeping with loud, ugly, unrestrained sobs that echo pitifully through the cavernous, beautiful space. Carolyn and Howard remain completely paralyzed, standing like stone statues in the middle of the aisle, entirely unable to comfort their favorite golden child. The sheer, unimaginable magnitude of their impending financial and social ruin pins them firmly to the floor, stripping them of their ability to move or speak. From our isolated, quiet table in the deep shadows, Bennett and I watch the magnificent, flawless collapse of their highly toxic empire. The golden child is fundamentally broken, her stolen crown permanently shattered, while we remain completely untouched, silently observing the perfect, devastating, and entirely natural consequences of their own unbridled vanity and staggering cruelty. The rapid evacuation of the grand ballroom unfolds with breathtaking speed, resembling passengers desperately fleeing a sinking luxury ocean liner. The hundreds of elite attendees who were eager to bask in the glow of the prestigious event just moments prior now scramble toward the gilded exits in a frantic, uncoordinated mass exodus. The rustling of expensive silk gowns and the sharp clicking of designer heels echo chaotically against the marble floors as the high society crowd actively practically runs to distance themselves from the toxic, radioactive fallout of the shattered engagement. The string quartet hired to provide elegant background ambiance abruptly stops playing hurriedly, packing their expensive instruments into velvet-lined cases in total suffocating silence. Dozens of half-empty crystal champagne flutes and untouched plates of imported caviar are left abandoned on the immaculate white tablecloth, serving as a mocking testament to the extravagant waste of the completely ruined evening. Carolyn and Howard remain absolutely frozen in the center of the vast, emptying room, entirely incapable of processing the monumental scale of their social and financial destruction. Riley continues to weep inconsolably on the polished wooden dance floor, her frantic sobs echoing pitifully through the cavernous, beautiful space. The absolute finality of their public execution hangs heavily in the chilled air. From our isolated table in the deep shadows, Bennett and I observe the flawless, magnificent collapse of their carefully constructed, fraudulent empire. We do not move to assist them or offer a single gesture of misplaced comfort. We simply sit in quiet, profound satisfaction, watching the very foundation of their relentless vanity crumble into fine, useless dust. As the final horrified guests slip out through the heavy carved wooden doors, The atmosphere in the ballroom shifts from a site of social devastation to a scene of cold clinical corporate reckoning. The hotel finance director, a sharp, unyielding professional clad in a meticulous dark suit, emerges from the administrative wing of the venue. He moves with extreme deliberate purpose across the deserted dance floor, holding a thick, heavy leather portfolio containing the comprehensive final accounting for the disastrous evening. He is flanked by two senior members of the elite security team, projecting an aura of undeniable absolute legal authority. The finance director bypasses the weeping Riley completely and stops directly in front of my paralyzed parents. He presents the heavy leather binder to Howard with a crisp, completely emotionless efficiency. The finance director thoroughly and systematically explains the devastating reality of their current financial predicament. He clearly outlines that because the ultimate ownership of the Grand Monarch rests entirely with Bennett, all previously assumed waivers, complimentary luxury upgrades, and discretionary friends and family discounts have been immediately and permanently revoked. He directs Howard to review the intricately detailed itemized invoice, specifying the astronomical premium costs of the imported floral arches, the top-tier private security detail, the customized Michelin star catering, and the massive punitive cancellation fees triggered by the sudden catastrophic termination of the event. Howard slowly opens the leather binder, his hands trembling violently as his eyes lock onto the staggering final total printed boldly at the bottom of the crisp white page. The color entirely violently drains from his face as the sheer, unimaginable magnitude of the debt fully registers in his panicked mind. The invoice totals hundreds of thousands of dollars, a sum that vastly exceeds their liquid assets and entirely eclipses the value of their heavily leveraged suburban home. The finance director points with clinical precision to the binding vendor contracts attached to the back of the invoice, emphasizing the specific airtight liability clauses I had expertly woven into the fine print days ago. He firmly reminds my parents that they willingly signed these legally binding documents, assuming absolute sole financial responsibility for every single extravagant expense incurred tonight. Carolyn leans over to look at the staggering numbers, her breath hitching in her throat, as the terrifying reality of total, unmitigated bankruptcy crashes down upon her. She realizes with bone-chilling, absolute certainty that there is no hidden loophole, no desperate negotiation, and no possible escape from the massive financial crater she eagerly dug for herself. The contracts I drafted trapped them completely and flawlessly, isolating my own identity and legally binding my parents to their own unchecked, relentless gluttony. The finance director informs them that the remaining balance must be settled immediately, threatening swift, aggressive legal action, and the immediate seizure of assets if the astronomical debt is not satisfied. Howard clutches his chest, struggling to breathe under the crushing, suffocating weight of his impending absolute ruin, while Carolyn covers her face, letting out a low, terrified whimper of sheer defeat. Bennett and I stand up from our peripheral table, leaving the devastated family completely trapped in their self-inflicted financial prison. We walk out of the grand ballroom together, stepping into the crisp, cool Chicago night air, entirely unburdened and profoundly free. The swift and brutal aftermath of the engagement party bleeds heavily into the early hours of the following morning. I arrive at my corporate public relations office precisely at 8 o'clock, stepping into the sleek, modern sanctuary of my professional domain. The expansive glass-walled suite overlooking the city skyline perfectly reflects the immaculate, orderly control I maintain over my own life. I settle into my ergonomic chair, reviewing the early morning market reports with deep, quiet satisfaction, knowing that the chaotic, toxic chapter of my biological family has been definitively closed. However, my parents possess a terrifying lack of boundaries, driven by the sheer frantic desperation of their imminent total bankruptcy. Around 9 o'clock, the serene quiet of the corporate floor is violently disrupted. Carolyn, Howard, and Riley completely bypass the downstairs building, security slipping into the executive elevator bank in a frantic, unhinged bid for a miraculous bailout. They burst through the frosted glass doors of the public relations firm, completely ignoring the startled protests of my executive reception team. The visual contrast between my sophisticated professional environment and their pathetic, disheveled appearance is absolutely staggering. They look as though they have not slept for a single second. Carolyn is still wearing the smeared, smudged makeup from her public humiliation the night before, her usually immaculate hair, now a chaotic, tangled mess. Howard looks completely aged and physically diminished, his shoulders slumped under the invisible crushing weight of the hundreds of thousands of dollars in sudden debt. Riley trails behind them, her face swollen and blotchy, entirely stripped of her haughty, unearned arrogance. They are no longer the aggressive, demanding social climbers who confidently stole my wedding venue. They are a broken, desperate trio of beggars standing awkwardly on the plush carpet of my pristine corporate reception area. My senior assistant immediately reaches for her desk phone, intending to summon the building security team to forcibly remove the unauthorized intruders. I step out of my glass-walled office, raising a single calm hand to signal my assistant to stand down. I do not need armed guards to handle the pathetic remnants of my toxic family. I project an aura of absolute terrifying detachment as I slowly approach the reception desk, carrying a thick stack of legally binding documents freshly printed from my legal department. Carolyn immediately launches into a frantic, desperate plea for extreme financial mercy. She openly leverages the deeply hypocritical concept of family loyalty, weeping hysterically as she describes the terrifying, looming threat of their complete, total bankruptcy. She begs me to speak with Bennett to leverage my influence as his future wife to somehow magically erase the massive astronomical debt they incurred at his luxury hotel. She frantically promises to completely change her behavior to respect my career and to finally treat me as a valued, cherished member of the family if I just provide them with a massive immediate bailout. Howard joins the pathetic chorus, reminding me of the blood bond we share, desperately insisting that a family must always protect its own during times of catastrophic crisis. Riley stands silently in the background, weeping softly and staring at the floor, entirely incapable of meeting my cold, unwavering gaze. I listen to their frantic, pathetic begging with absolute icy stillness, entirely unmoved by their manufactured, desperate tears. I do not raise my voice or engage in a bitter, emotional argument regarding their decades of relentless abuse. I simply step forward and drop the heavy stack of official cease and desist orders directly onto the sleek, polished reception desk with a sharp, definitive thud. The sound slices cleanly through their hysterical pleading, forcing them into a sudden, terrified silence. I address my parents with a devastatingly cold, clinical precision, perfectly mirroring the exact cruel detachment my father used against me on the day they hijacked my reservation. I explicitly remind Howard of the harsh, unyielding words he delivered to me over the phone when he blindly demanded I sacrifice my own happiness for Riley. I firmly reiterate his exact phrasing, noting that my wedding was merely a trivial party that could be easily discarded. I then flawlessly apply his own toxic logic to their current catastrophic predicament, asserting with absolute icy clarity that their impending total financial funeral is completely and utterly not my responsibility to fund. I make it abundantly crystal clear that there will be no miraculous billionaire bailout, no hidden financial mercy, and absolutely no continuation of our familial relationship. I instruct them to carefully read the binding legal orders resting on the desk, which explicitly prohibit them from ever contacting me, approaching my residence, or entering my professional workspace ever again under the strict threat of immediate severe prosecution. I deliver the ultimate permanent rejection without shedding a single tear or showing a microscopic fraction of regret. I stand tall in the center of my flawless corporate sanctuary, completely reclaiming every ounce of the dignity and power they spent decades aggressively attempting to steal from me. Having delivered the final absolute execution of our relationship, I do not wait for their shocked, horrified response. I execute a crisp, precise pivot, turning my back on them completely and forever. I walk smoothly back toward my quiet, glass-walled office, the heavy sound of the door clicking firmly shut, serving as the ultimate definitive period at the end of our toxic shared history. I leave them standing totally alone in the corporate reception area, completely, entirely ruined and permanently banished from the beautiful, triumphant life I have flawlessly built for myself. The heavy click of my glass office door sealing shut behind me was the final punctuation mark on 29 years of familial subjugation. I did not look back through the transparent walls to watch my parents and sister crumple under the weight of their own catastrophic financial ruin. I simply walked over to my desk, picked up my steaming cup of coffee, and gazed out at the sprawling Chicago skyline. The crisis had been managed, the hostile threats neutralized, and the toxic elements permanently excised from my ecosystem. I had spent my entire life acting as the invisible shock absorber for their relentless vanity. But that era was officially terminated. The suffocating anxiety that used to paralyze my chest whenever my mother called was entirely gone, replaced by a profound crystalline clarity. The slate was wiped perfectly clean, preparing the ground for the life I actually wanted to build. 3 months later, the suffocating concrete and glass of the city have been entirely replaced by the breathtaking, untamed wilderness of Big Sky Country. We are standing on the sprawling grounds of a massive private nature reserve in Montana, a vast, secluded property that Bennett purchased years ago to escape the relentless noise of his corporate empire. The air here is sharp and fragrant, carrying the crisp scent of ancient pine trees and melting alpine snow. There are no gilded crystal chandeliers, no suffocating floral arches, and absolutely no desperate social climbers trying to leverage our existence for their own petty gain. The sweeping panoramic view of the jagged snow-capped mountains stretching infinitely across the horizon provides a magnificent natural cathedral that dwarfs any manufactured luxury my parents could have ever desperately tried to aggressively secure to feed their own bottomless, massive egos. I breathe in the perfect silence. Today is our actual wedding day, completely free from the malicious interference and petty sabotage that ruined our initial plans. The atmosphere is profoundly calm, completely devoid of the frantic, toxic energy that constantly plagued every single gathering my family ever orchestrated. I am getting ready inside a beautiful rustic timber cabin, my dedicated public relations team bustling efficiently around me with genuine warm smiles. They are the women who stood by me through countless high-stakes corporate crises, and they are standing by me now, ensuring every detail of this deeply personal celebration is executed with flawless precision. I do not have to worry about locked doors, stolen vendors, or hidden agendas. I step into my authentic custom-tailored silk evening gown, the very same masterpiece that commanded the silent awe of the ballroom during my sister's catastrophic, spectacular downfall in front of Chicago high society elite members forever. The heavy, structural silk glides perfectly over my silhouette, completely unmarred by jagged scissor cuts or crude safety pins. As I look at my reflection in the tall wooden mirror, I do not see the perpetual scapegoat or the forgotten daughter. I see a powerful, unyielding strategist who masterfully orchestrated her own absolute liberation. I step out of the cabin and walk down a natural stone pathway toward a clearing overlooking a massive, pristine glacial lake. The guest list for this intimate ceremony is incredibly small and fiercely protected. We have invited only the people who have proven their absolute, unwavering loyalty and genuine character. There are no obligatory invitations extended to appease fragile egos, and no high society strangers wandering around treating our sacred commitment like a cheap networking opportunity meant to elevate a deeply fraudulent, heavily fabricated, pathetic social standing built entirely on desperate, toxic, shallow family lies. Bennett is waiting for me at the edge of the water, looking breathtakingly handsome. He has traded his faded green flannel shirt and scuffed boots for a sharply tailored dark charcoal suit that perfectly highlights his quiet, commanding authority. His dark, intelligent eyes lock onto mine, radiating an immense, profound warmth that immediately anchors my soul. He does not need a grand, superficial stage to prove his worth. His power is entirely inherent, completely unbothered by the performative expectations of the outside world. Standing beside him is his tightly knit inner circle, a small group of trusted corporate executives and lifelong friends who value authentic integrity over manufactured status. They welcome me with respectful, affirming nods, entirely devoid of the judgmental, calculating stares I endured from my own blood relatives, who constantly viewed me as a highly inconvenient, completely worthless obstacle, blocking their path to unearned, stolen, massive financial wealth. Surprisingly, standing respectfully among the small gathering of guests is Devin Prescott. Following the spectacular implosion of his engagement to Riley Devin and Bennett, maintained a quiet but highly effective professional relationship. Recognizing Devin's undeniable intellect and genuine commitment to his community, Bennett ultimately approved the massive real estate philanthropic project in Atlanta, cementing a powerful alliance between Apex Holdings and the prestigious Prescott family. Devin attends our ceremony not as a lingering ghost from a toxic past, but as an honored guest and a respected peer. His presence is a beautiful poetic testament to the profound truth that authentic respect is earned through unwavering character, not manipulated through deceptive, superficial charm. He watches the ceremony with a calm, supportive demeanor, completely free from the frantic, manipulative chaos my sister had previously tried to aggressively drag him into simply to steal his generational family wealth and high elite social status. The ceremony itself is brief, deeply personal, and entirely authentic. We do not exchange hollow, performative vows designed to impress an audience. We speak quietly to each other, acknowledging the absolute, unbreakable partnership we have forged through the fires of betrayal and corporate warfare. As Bennett slides the simple, elegant gold band onto my finger, I feel a profound, overwhelming sense of permanence. The chaotic, turbulent noise of my past, the screaming voicemails, the stolen dresses, the $18,000 restaurant bills, all completely evaporate into the crisp mountain breeze. I am no longer fighting a defensive battle against people who want to tear me down. I am stepping firmly into a future where I hold the absolute, undisputed power over my own trajectory, entirely insulated from the toxic, deeply malicious influences that actively sought to completely obliterate my overall professional success and my fundamental, basic psychological well-being forever. Following the ceremony, we transitioned smoothly into a relaxed, sophisticated evening reception under the vast, open Montana sky. The catering is immaculate, featuring fresh, local ingredients, prepared by a private chef without a single ounce of pretentious theatricality. There are no forced speeches, filled with underlying passive-aggressive insults, and no frantic relatives desperately trying to command the attention of wealthy strangers. My colleagues and Bennett's trusted associates mingle effortlessly, sharing genuine laughter and quiet, sophisticated conversations. The atmosphere is characterized by an absolute, profound safety, a secure emotional perimeter that I have ruthlessly defended and permanently fortified. I sit at a beautiful wooden table next to my husband, sipping a glass of excellent vintage wine, feeling a deep, resonant peace settling completely over my entire being. I am finally entirely surrounded by individuals who fiercely protect my peace, rather than aggressively attempting to maliciously destroy it without any hesitation. As the evening progresses, the sun begins to set slowly behind the jagged mountain peaks, painting the sprawling sky in brilliant, striking shades of deep violet and burning gold. I excuse myself briefly from the joyful conversation and walk toward the edge of the wooden viewing deck, allowing the cool evening breeze to wash over my face. I lean against the sturdy wooden railing, looking out over the magnificent, unyielding landscape. The absolute vastness of the wilderness perfectly mirrors the immense, boundless freedom I have finally secured for myself. I take a slow, deep breath, tracing the intricate timeline of the past few months in my highly analytical mind. I analyze the precise strategic moves, the calculated silence, the perfectly drafted liability contracts, and the flawless execution of the grand ballroom exposure that completely, systematically, and permanently eradicated their entire superficial, toxic, deeply abusive suburban family empire forever and completely. I reflect on the terrifying realization that my own parents were completely willing to sacrifice my entire career and my emotional sanity simply to secure a fleeting illusion of social superiority. I think about my sister who maliciously butchered my wedding dress and eagerly attempted to steal a billionaire out of pure, unadulterated venom. I do not feel a single lingering ounce of sorrow or regret for permanently excising them from my universe. They were a hostile, aggressive infection that required a radical surgical removal. I did not just survive their brutal, multifaceted betrayal. I actively and brilliantly engineered their total, absolute downfall, using their own blinding arrogance and unchecked greed as the primary weapons of their destruction. I handed them the exact rope they eagerly used to hang their own reputations, completely and utterly obliterating their toxic legacy and securing my own brilliant, beautiful, unapologetic, limitless future with Bennett.
I used to ride upon your shoulders, thinking you could touch the sky. Every road felt less uncertain when I saw the world through your eyes. You were stronger than the mountains, taller than the northern pines. And when the winter winds were coming, you would stand between them and I. Time kept moving like the river, years slipped slowly out to sea. But no matter where life took me, you were always part of me. I am my father's daughter, in every step I take, in every time I choose to stand. When it's easier to break, I carry your courage in my heart, your fire inside my soul. And though the years keep moving on, your love still leads me home. You taught me strength is not in power, but in kindness when it's hard. You taught me how to keep on going when the road grows cold and dark. Every lesson, every story, every laugh around the flame lies within me like an echo, calling softly through my name. And when I face my greatest battles, when I feel I can't go on, I can hear your voice beside me saying, child, you're stronger than you know. I am my father's daughter, in every step I take, in every time I choose to stand. When it's easier to break, I carry your courage in my heart, your fire inside my soul. And though the years keep moving on, your love still leads me home. One day the snow will cover footprints, one day the fire will burn low. But the things a father gives his daughter are the things that never go. Not the gold or not the stories, not the battles that he won, but the quiet way he loved her and the woman she becomes. I am my father's daughter, and I always will remain. Through every triumph, every